Chapter 2781, A coincidence. Gu Shizhou studied him for a while and heaved a sigh after making some calculations about his destiny. Your name is incomplete. I shall now grant you a surname. What about Fan? Qianqi's eyes glistened with joy. Thank you, my master. From now on, I will be known as Fan Qianshi. Do you know what the word Fan stands for? Please enlighten me, Qianshi answered. Your personality is unpredictable. There is no clear line between right or wrong for you. At times, your way of dealing with a situation may get a little too aggressive. Hence, the word Fan means to show great mercy. I hope that you can be compassionate and stay away from any wrongdoings. May you be a great man for thousands of years to come and protect the world with all you can. Fan Qianshi took some time to absorb her words and then replied, I shall do as you said, master. Due to his unique physique that was nurtured by the essence of heaven and earth, the rate of his growth was tremendous. In 3 years, his physical appearance had changed from that of a toddler into a teenager with adult qualities and strength. In reality, Di Hao could not help but sigh. As expected, Fan Qianshi really did become Gu Zijia's disciple. He knew his mother well enough to be aware that she would either keep her guard high up or trust a person wholeheartedly. There was no in-between. She even gave Fan Qianshi his name. It seemed like Gu Shizhou was ready to let him take over her role when she was finally gone. At this point, no signs of the Master of Heavenly Law were revealed yet. He wondered if the Master of Heavenly Law had already come into existence by that time. That sounded very plausible since creating the heavenly laws could be a very long process. It was meant to create harmony among the 6 worlds over time. When Gu Shizhou was still alive, the 6 worlds were not well established yet. Anyone could do anything without being bound by any laws. Fighting was a common occurrence when things did not work out the way a party intended. It was a world without structure, governance, and laws. Without a proper set of rules, the Master of Heavenly Law would have no role to play. Nonetheless, perhaps it just was not the right time for Di Fui to show up yet. Di Hao was a little disappointed. He stared at Gu Shizhou in his vision and could not help but wonder how Fan Qianshi became so wicked. He decided to keep watching to find out more because, as far as he was concerned, Fan Qianshi was not a bad person when Gu Shizhou took him under her apprenticeship. Fortunately for Di Hao, the tracing spell that used had the features to speed up the images in his vision or even rewind to help him see the details better. His vision was brought forward across the timeline. A decade had passed, so Fan Qianshi and Wu Qianyan had been with Gu Shizhou for 10 years now. Over the past decade, Gu Shizhou had been very mysterious and kept a very low profile. She never met any of the kings or leaders. When she had to travel somewhere, she would always use the facial disguise technique to cover up her identity. The wizardry barrier that secured the valley, on the contrary, had become stronger and brighter in time, so no one dared to cross the line. Nonetheless, in actuality, Gu Zijia's kung fu did not improve at all over the last decade. Instead, she had taken many steps backward. Her level of spiritual power was only about 10% left of her former strength. The main positive was that she could upkeep her divine aura, so people dared not take advantage of her. When any leaders came to visit, they would be turned down by the creator of the universe and met by Fan Qianshi. As soon as Gu Shizhou took him as her disciple, she taught him everything that she knew, thus taking his progress to a higher level. In a decade, Fan Qianqi's kung fu had already surpassed any other immortals with thousands of years of cultivation. When he was born, he was only at the level of a golden immortal. By now, he was almost a great deity. The rulers of the 6 worlds all witnessed the tremendous progress of the child, which they knew was only possible under the guidance of the creator of the universe. Chapter 2782, A Coincidence. 2. The child was known to be a genius, but his talents would not have been discovered without a great mentor. Therefore, the people of all 6 worlds became more intimidated by Gu Zijia's power and decided to stop doing anything that upset her, which included fighting. The decade was an unusually peaceful era. After years of war and chaos, all kingdoms could finally recuperate and rebuild themselves. According to Fan Qianqi's biological age, he was only 16 years old, but his adult appearance resembled nothing of his teenage years. He became a handsome man that was unsurpassed in valor and brilliance. When Wu Qianyan first met Gu Shijiu, she was only 8 years old. Time had completely transformed her into a young woman of grace and elegance too. Unlike Fan Qianshi, Wu Qianyan was not born to be a genius. Still, her exposure to the creator of the universe had opened up opportunities for her to improve her power. In time, she benefited greatly from Gu Zijia's help and finally achieved the level of a golden immortal. At the very least, she was able to keep herself safe in times of danger. Moreover, the people from all 6 worlds acknowledged her identity as the servant of the creator of the universe. Hence, none of them dared to make any moves against her or challenge her authority, even though she would generally be assigned to take care of trivial errands. Warm spring winds wafted across the room, carrying the warmth of the sun along with it. On a bamboo chair, Gu Shijiu sat in repose. A sudden movement caught her attention, so she quickly opened her eyes. She caught Fan Qianshi quietly sneaking in. He was about to place a hot bowl of congee on the table for her. The pleasant scent of the blue congee lingered in the air, blasting her senses with an eagerness to taste the food. Their eyes met, and Fan Qianshi blushed a little. He looked away and said, "Master, this is a bowl of blue congee that I made with meat broth. Try it." Gu Shijiu remained still and looked rather unimpressed. "You are doing this again. Haven't I told you to focus on your practice instead? You shouldn't be doing the chores," she said in a rather icy tone. Fan Qianshi seemed slightly disappointed but chose to explain himself. "Master, you must have overexerted yourself. Your complexion is slightly pale. This bowl of blue congee is meant to invigorate your body with its rich nutrients. Making this did not take much of my time, anyway. Master, you should finish it up. I shall continue my practice now." Gu Shijiu pinched her lips into a thin line in disapproval. "Don't repeat this next time," she added. Slowly, she picked up the bowl and slowly drank it down. Delighted, Fan Qianshi then proceeded to practice his kung fu. Gu Shijiu sat in a brown study chair while wondering if she was overthinking the situation because Fan Qianshi seemed to treat her like she was more than his master. She was obviously aware that her condition had worsened over time, but no amount of food could restore her health. Nothing could stop the deterioration that had already taken place many years ago. Even a divine being had 5 dying symptoms. Although she still bore the look of a young woman, the first dying symptom was already emerging. With her decrease in power, her lifespan was now less than a century. She gently knocked her knuckles on the table while getting all caught up in her thoughts. The next day, Fan Qianshi approached her with another bowl of hot food. Only this time, it was a bowl of brown rice congee, enriched with many nutritional herbs. The collection of the herbs alone would take him at least half a day. In addition to the special technique of making the congee, he must have spent at least a day preparing it. Excitedly, Fan Qianshi put the bowl down in front of her. Gu Shijiu was in the middle of her writing when he interrupted her. She took a look at the congee, then at Fan Qianshi. "Haven't I told you to stop doing this?" Hesitantly, Fan Qianshi explained, "Master, the red rice is sourced from the monster kingdom, it is known to be one of their treasured resources. Its nutrients can give you strength. You will feel better after drinking it." Chapter 2783, A Coincidence, 3. Before he could finish his sentence, the bowl of congee was already splashed right across the floor. Gu Shijiu had pushed the bowl off the table. "Go away," she sternly said as soon as the bowl shattered on the floor. Fan Qianshi was utterly surprised by Gu Zijia's sudden reaction. His fingers immediately started to tremble uncontrollably under his sleeves. Before he could explain himself further, Gu Shijiu was already shouting at him. "I know myself better than you do, so there is no need for you to worry about me. Stay away for a month and don't show up again." Fan Qianshi clenched his fists. "Yes," he finally agreed after a long pause. He exited her room slowly. The room fell into complete silence after his departure. The congee was still warm on the floor, infusing the air with its delicious scent. Gu Shijiu sighed while looking at the wasted food. The scent of the delicious congee was still tempting her. She liked the taste of congee. Although she no longer needed sustenance from food, she could not keep herself away from all the delicious food in the world. Very often, she would disguise herself and join the locals in tasting good food. Di Hao watched as Gu Shijiu hesitantly looked at the wasted congee on the floor for a while before clearing the mess up. He shook his head in disapproval, for he knew that Fan Qianxue was indeed hoping for something more from his relationship with Gu Shijiu. Nonetheless, Gu Shijiu obviously did not feel the same way about him. Fan Qianxue was only a disciple in her eyes. Did Fan Qianxue become evil in the end by turning his love into hatred? To find out, Di Hao had to continue. The scent of the congee managed to trigger Gu Zijia's appetite. She decided to disguise herself so that she could blend into the crowd at a famous restaurant in the Monster Kingdom. All she asked for was a bowl of red rice congee. The place was rather crowded and filled with uproarious talk and laughter. However, Gu Shijiu did not request for an independent room. She enjoyed the hustle and bustle of life at times. The liveliness there certainly excited her. The red rice congee from the restaurant tasted excellent, though it was a little expensive. A bowl of congee cost her 1,000 spiritual stones. Fortunately, Gu Shijiu had many spiritual stones with her, so the price did not bother her at all. Her hunger for food took over her, so she decided to add more dishes to her meal. Just when she was happily eating, a sudden wave of silence took over the entire place. Gasps of astonishment could be heard across the air. "Oh, my! He is so handsome. Too beautiful." Handsome is not enough to describe his ethereal beauty. He is surreal. The man's appearance had provoked much discussion. Gu Shijiu was curious, so she looked up and saw a handsome and young man by the door. He stood as straight as an arrow, and his silky smooth, pitch-black hair gently hung across his shoulder. His exquisite features were as pretty as any artist could paint a man to be. There was a red jade piece embellished on his forehead band, faintly glistening with light. Meanwhile, the corners of his mouth twitched up into a nonchalant smile while he stared at the crowd with undivided attention. His eyes swept across the hall, and everyone's heart thumped with excitement whenever his eyes met with theirs. All the men sat up straight in a proper manner. As for the women, they were busy fixing their hair and makeup so that they could present their best selves. In reality, Di Hao was in shock. His fingers were trembling so much that the spell almost failed to channel the vision over to him. He wondered who the man was and felt that he reminded him of his father, Di Fui. However, their looks were not exactly the same. In fact, the man in the vision was not as good-looking as Di Fui. Di Hao's heart raced in excitement. He had to continue. Back in his vision, every table in the restaurant was already occupied. Some were full of people, while others still had seats available. Like Gu Shijiu, some were also in the restaurant all alone. "Is there any room available?" the young man finally asked. His voice was charming and sweet. The waiter and the owner of the restaurant both shook their heads in unison. It was the busiest time of the day in the restaurant, so the rooms were all full. Chapter 2784, A Coincidence. 4. Although the restaurant was full, the staff seemed eager for the young man to stay. "Gentlemen, would you be open to sharing your table with other guests?" they kindly offered. They then asked the guests in the restaurant, "Is there anyone who would like to share a table with this gentleman? I can give you a discount for sharing the table." "Me? Here. Come here. I can share the table with him." All of a sudden, about 7 or 8 people stood up, offering to share their table in an eager manner. Apparently, the young man's beauty had conquered the hearts of many, both men and women were interested. Gu Shijiu continued to enjoy her drink without volunteering herself. In fact, everything that happened in the restaurant made her laugh. These days, people were so easily obsessed with one's appearance. Nonetheless, she wondered which table would the young man finally go to. Of many that stood up, there was a very pretty lady that was seated next to Gu Zijia's table. Coincidentally, the lady was also wearing a red dress that evening, so her outfit matched with the young man's red robes perfectly. Like Gu Shizhou, the lady was sitting alone too. Some men tried to ask if they could sit with her before, but she turned them all down with an uninviting and stern look. Nevertheless, this time, she was the one who made the invitation to the young man. The young man slowly walked towards the lattice direction. Color bloomed in her cheeks as he approached her table. She was excited that the young man was about to accept her invitation. "Gentlemen, please." The young man did not wait for her to finish before walking past her table as if she never existed. He stopped in front of Gu Zijia's table and asked, "Lady, may I join your table?" Gu Shizhou was surprised. Her original appearance was disguised under a spell, so she carried the look of an average maiden. She was not hideous, but not exactly attractive. Her looks were considered common, and her presence could be easily dismissed in a crowd. Gu Shizhou thought that the ordinary look she carried would be a safe disguise for her. Never had she thought that the young man would come up to her all of a sudden to share a table. She touched her face intuitively to make sure that she still had the appearance of an ordinary maiden and was relieved that her true appearance was not exposed. Perplexed, she then looked at the young man. He was still standing right across her table and looking at her smilingly. She could not tell what he was thinking from his expression but found it rather odd. His face was, however, very attractive, regardless of his expression. Nonetheless, Gu Shizhou was not interested in a relationship. She only thought that the young man was a little odd. "I did not invite you." "Look around, many did," she gently reminded him. The young man finally smiled and asked, "Why didn't you?" Gu Shizhou did not answer. "Aren't you attracted by my appearance?" "Frankly, I am not," she answered. She had seen many beautiful men all her life but was never interested in any. The creator of the universe had to be austere without any selfish desire. The young man took out his fan and waved it in his hand. "That is right. I cannot eat well under their intense gaze of admiration, so I will not join their tables. You are not friendly, but you are the kind of table mate that I need. I shall sit here, then." He gave the chair a quick sweep, so as to flick away any dust from the seat. He then sat down right away. Gu Shizhou did not make any comments since the man was only there to share the table, so she did not really mind. The young man proceeded to order a few dishes, and the food did not take long to be served on his side of the table. He took a look at the plates and bowls that were not neatly placed and waved his hand to cast a spell to rearrange the dishes into 2 lines. Chapter 2785, Obsessive and Compulsive Behavior. He then took a look at the pile of plates on Gu Zijia's side of the table. Gu Shizhou was very casual and unconcerned about the table manners here in the restaurant. She did not mind how the waiter placed the dishes on her table. All she did was eat. A synonym for casual and unconcerned would be messy. Gu Shizhou wanted to take a few bites on the steamed fish, but before her chopsticks reached the meat, the whole dish was already moving away from her. Instead, a dish of spicy fried pork slices replaced it, and her chopsticks went right in. She was stunned as she looked up and saw the dishes on her side of the table magically arranged neatly into 2 lines. "What are you trying to do?" She looked at the young man and was unimpressed. "I cannot stand the mess. Please do not mind me, it is an old habit of mine." The young man continued to enjoy his meal. Gu Shizhou said nothing more. There were all kinds of people in the world, many with weird behaviors and bad tempers. As the creator of the universe, she should not mind it and take this as a chance to show her generosity. Therefore, she continued to enjoy her food without any remarks. Gu Shizhou liked all kinds of food with shells, like prawns and crabs. However, instead of using utensils, she preferred to eat shellfish with her hands. She thought that it was a very mundane way of savoring food, which was something she enjoyed. She cared about cleanliness as well, so all the shells were placed on a plate instead of on the table. She thought that it was already neat enough, but to her surprise, the young man remained unimpressed. He took a look at the plateful of shells and decided to do something about it. With a wave, he cast another spell and placed all the shells on the plate neatly according to their sizes. The mess of shells was beautifully arranged into intricate patterns of a flower. Gu Shizhou had to put a large shell down on the table but was caught in a dilemma. The shell would simply ruin the patterns that were already arranged on the plate. Troubled, she was beginning to feel annoyed with the man who was sharing her table. It had reached a point where she could not even fully enjoy her food. After all, she was here to eat, not to make decorations. It was tiring to share a table with someone with such an obsessive and compulsive behavior. Gu Shizhou tried to suppress her irritation but could not. She decided to throw the shell onto the plate and turn the shells on the plate into a mess. The young man threw a sharp look at her, and she did not hesitate to do the same back to him. Their eyes lingered on one another's face for a while before the young man finally spoke. In order to return your favor for sharing the table with me, I shall remove the shells for you. Is that all right? The young man gently offered with a tender smile. Gu Shizhou thought about his offer for a second and agreed, great, please do. The young man cast another spell from his fingertips, making every shellfish on every dish move. All the shells of the prawns and crabs were removed and placed neatly on another plate. As usual, these shells were arranged in a proper pattern. The meat that remained on her plate was nicely shelled with very little fuss. Gu Shizhou was suddenly drawn to his obsessive and compulsive manner. He could perfectly fit into the Department of Justice. The 6 worlds lacked a set of laws to govern the course of life. They also lacked a leader. The man could be a great leader in framing a constitution. Certainly, it was just a sudden inspiration. She was not very keen on making it happen. However, the law could not be simply made and governed by anyone. The role must be played by a divine being that was brought about naturally by the essence of heaven and earth. Only then would it take its effect. Gu Shizhou studied the man and realized that he was only a mighty immortal. As far as she was concerned, Fan Qianshi was the only man who was formed and nurtured by the essence of heaven and earth. Chapter 2786, Being jealous, she was suddenly reminded of Fan Qianshi and sighed. He was a great disciple but had, unfortunately, become enamored of her. It was indeed troublesome. First of all, she did not have much time left. Secondly, as the creator of the universe, she should share her unconditional love with every being in the world and not limit herself to a relationship. He needed to understand the importance of being unbiased, or else the 6 worlds would fall back into a mess once he took the role from her. Hence, she needed him to move on. While she was caught in her preoccupation, someone suddenly made fun of her with total contempt. Did you suddenly become dumb? An ugly being will always be ugly. A simple, kind gesture from a handsome man can easily make you dumbstruck. Gu Shizhou followed the voice and noticed that the remark was coming from the beautiful lady beside her. Scornfully, the lady was looking at her with resentment. Was the lady jealous? Gu Shizhou felt sorry for her. Her attractiveness was only in her appearance. The lady gave the young man a quick look and caught him looking back at her with a half-smile. He had not commented anything about the incident. After a pause, Gu Shizhou asked smilingly, I have had enough of the shellfish. Gentlemen, would you please help me remove the bones from my fish? The young man was fascinated by Gu Zijia's sudden request. Ugly beings will do all sorts of things to catch other people's attention. The reason he offered his help to you at first was because of your messy table manners. Now you are taking his help for granted. Why don't you have a better look at yourself? Do you really think you are attractive enough to make so many unreasonable requests? The lady spoke arrogantly. Gu Shizhou could not care less about the rude lady. Quietly, she smiled at her and decided to handle the fish on her own. She took the dish over and started removing the fish bones with her fingers. Soon, all of her fingers were stained with sauce. The young man was speechless. With a sigh, he took the dish away from Gu Shizhou and started removing the bones for her. He then handed her a silk handkerchief. Use this to clean your fingers. Gu Shizhou did not refuse his offer. She took the handkerchief over and simply rubbed her hands in it. She was ready to put the handkerchief down on the table but was suddenly stopped by the young man. He was already sitting next to her by then. He grasped her by the wrist and took the handkerchief. Patiently, he started cleaning every stain that was left on her hands. Gu Shizhou was astonished. She tilted her head to have a look at the other lattice expression. The lady gasped in disbelief, as her presence was completely ignored. Gu Shizhou did not mind that he was touching her hand, as long as the lady was annoyed. What intrigued her most was the sudden change of the young man's attitude towards her needs. He was exceptionally patient with her. If he had to take other people's table manners and hygiene so personally every time he sat with someone else, he would be so busy clearing someone else's mess every time he ate. Gu Shizhou actually felt sorry for him. Young man, being too compulsive is a burden in life. It will not do you any good, she told him while gently tapping his shoulder. The young man remained quiet, and Gu Shizhou no longer cared about him. It was time for her to go. May I have the bill please? The owner approached her hurriedly. That will be 3,006 spiritual stones. Gu Shizhou reached her back pocket to take out her purse, only to realize that it was no longer there. The owner's friendly face slowly faded. If Gu Shizhou refused to pay for the food, he would need to work for at least a month to make up for the loss. Lady, what happened? Gu Shizhou awkwardly replied, my purse is gone. The owner was offended. Are you making up reasons to eat for free? Gu Shizhou never thought that someday she would experience such embarrassment by having her purse stolen. She did not even know when it was taken away. Chapter 2787, She and I are like old friends. No one got close to her during the time that she was in the restaurant, so her own carelessness was the only logical explanation for her missing purse. Although Di Hao was in the comfort of Gu Zijia's bed, he felt anxious for her as well. He guessed that the concept of a storage space had yet to be invented during that primitive time. Meanwhile, the owner was infuriated. So, it seems you are here to get free food. Do you think I am a fool? The man reached out his hand to pull her collar. However, she would not let him do so and took a few quick steps back to avoid his hand. All of a sudden, a pouch filled with money was offered to cease the feud. Mister, I will pay for her bill. The owner was surprised by the young man's kind offer. He took a look at the pouch and felt bad for the amount of money that the young man was about to spend for the commoner. Gentlemen, her bill is quite a large sum of money. It is equivalent to the total income of a normal family in a year. You have only just met her. She and I are like old friends. I am willing to spend this amount of money on her. All the other guests in the restaurant were equally caught off guard by the man's generous offer. They did not think that the hideous girl was worthy of the handsome man's generosity. The beautiful lady from the next table was already clenching her fists in utter frustration. She wished she could give Gu Shizhou a tight slap in the face. Since someone was ready to offer up money to compensate the owner, he would definitely take it. He was all but ready to accept the payment but was suddenly interrupted. Hold on, Gu Shizhou interrupted. The owner looked at her in disbelief. What more do you want to say? Gu Shizhou knew very well that no one would do anything so unconditionally for a stranger. His generosity must come with a price. She had a feeling that the man was quite a problem, so she did not want to get too involved with him. At this point, she could no longer play dumb. She opened up her storage bag and took out another pouch of money. Swiftly, she threw the bag down on the table and said, Take this. There is more than what I have to pay. The bag contained at least 1,000 pieces of upper-class spiritual stone. Indeed, the total value was more than enough to pay for the bill. Many of the people in the restaurant had never seen a storage bag before. Therefore, many curious eyes were locked on her. Even the young man was surprised. He could not stop looking at her storage bag in astonishment. Gu Shizhou did not want to stay any longer, so she sealed away her storage bag and left the restaurant. In the wilderness, a whirling fog lingered in the air. The thick cloud of water droplets appeared so suddenly like it was formed out of thin air in an instant. Gu Shizhou watched as a lady in a dark green dress slowly emerged from the fog. "What are you trying to do?" she questioned the intruder. The lady in green was the same beauty that was sitting next to Gu Shizhou not long ago. The only difference was her outfit. She was wearing a dress of crimson color back then that looked very refined and elegant. With this dark green dress, she looked extremely wicked, as opposed to her elegant self back then. "I have underestimated you, lady. How did you manage to seduce such a handsome man with that hideous face of yours?" Abruptly, a snake-shaped sword appeared in her palm. The edge of the sword was as sharp as the fang of a venomous snake. "I shall now skin you alive so I can see what is beneath your ugly appearance." On the tip of the sword, a dark green snake emerged. In a snap, the snake made a lunge towards Gu Shizhou in a deadly manner. At the level of a golden immortal, every strike of hers could be considered as deadly. The snake was as swift as lightning, so it would be tricky for anyone to avoid its deadly attacks. However, Gu Shizhou was not just anyone from the mundane world. Even with only 10% of her spiritual power left, she was still much stronger than the lady in green. She reached out to the snake and grasped it at its weakest point. With just the twist of her wrist, the snake immediately faded away into bits of light. Chapter 2788, Look What You Made Me Do. The lady in green had not expected it. In just one move, she immediately realized that she had underestimated Gu Zijia's strength. Nonetheless, she was not ready to give up the fight just yet. She pointed her sword at Gu Shizhou and sent 3 more green snakes charging at her. The snakes were very venomous. Once bitten, one could consider themselves dead. However, Gu Shizhou simply waved her sleeves across the air and dismissed the snakes with a slight twitch of her fingertips. She did not even have to move a lot to cast the spell, yet all 3 snakes were already clenched by their necks. In an instant, the snakes were turned into glimpses of light and faded into nothingness. "Ugly woman, look what you made me do." This time, she raised the bar. In a mist of grayish-green fog suddenly appeared, and the water droplets within the clouds slowly condensed into a giant green python. Almost instantaneously, it became alive and made a lunge for Gu Shizhou. Gu Shizhou found the trick a little familiar as it was the devil venomous python. It was the most nefarious and demonical python that existed, equipped with deadly and yet lustful venom. The python would mate with its victim before swallowing the victim's soul as a whole. Gu Shizhou was a divine being with a generous spirit, but the latter's selfish act of jealousy was too much for her to forgive. They were not even enemies, and yet the lady desperately wanted her dead by crushing her soul. The lady was evil and unscrupulous, which was a rarity in Gu Zijia's life. With all that had happened, Gu Shizhou decided to serve her some punishment. She twisted her wrist in a circular motion to summon a golden whip which she used to attack the incoming python. The long whip was a magical item, so when Gu Shizhou had launched it toward the snake, 1,000 shining golden beams with boundless radiance were directed at it. The devil venomous python was obviously scared of the golden light. It tried to shrink its body as quickly as it could to avoid the ruthless attack. However, Gu Shizhou was not done with it. She took an intimidating step forward and flung her whip at the python again. It slowly took the form of a mighty dragon that came alive in a second. With its outstretched body, the dragon started attacking the python. The devil venomous python was terrified, huddling itself in fear. While the golden whip was still swinging in the air, Gu Shizhou suddenly collapsed with a temporary loss of consciousness. A sudden jolt had plunged her forward, thus stopping the constant stream of spiritual power to her hand. In an instant, the entire dragon disappeared from the air. Gu Shizhou could not help but curse. Her 5 dying symptoms had begun to take place. Sometimes, her spiritual power would fade away very suddenly. She just did not expect it to happen at this critical moment. The devil venomous python was ready to surrender, but the disappearance of the golden light had boosted its confidence. It had just escaped death and perhaps even had an opportunity to attack. Excitedly, it launched its second attack at Gu Shizhou. Gu Shizhou wanted to defend herself but was too weak even to stand up straight. She barely had any strength left to avoid the incoming strike. In dismay, she clenched her fists and was ready to admit defeat. The python was already closing in when an intricate melody started playing in the air. The tune was coming from a flute amid the fog. The tune was a weakness of the python. As soon as the melody was played, the python found itself paralyzed. Like a curse, the python started dancing along with the melody and had completely forgotten its mission. The lady in green was infuriated by the interception. She shouted out loud at the stranger in the fog, "Who is there? How dare you ruin my plan?" A stranger slowly walked out from the thick fog to answer her calling. The stranger was holding a fiery red umbrella and wore green robes that were slightly obscured in the fog, like a painting of distant mountains shrouded in mist and rain. With a slight smile, the stranger stared at the lady with contempt. The stranger was the young man from the restaurant. At this moment, he was holding an umbrella in one hand and a flute in another. The thick fog was cold and blustery, forming a strong contrast to his strong and vibrant appearance. Although his robes and the umbrella did not match, he was the kind of man who could carry any style with ease, even with obviously contrasting elements. Chapter 2789, Would you like to see? The lady gasped in disbelief as soon as she saw the man. She then quickly used another spell to summon her python back. However, the python was still dancing frantically, unable to control its body. For the first time, it did not obey her command. Gu Shizhou felt hopeful, so she stepped aside and took a rest under a nearby tree. At the side, she could tell that the melody began to speed up with heavy beats. Although it was only a tune to Gu Shizhou, it was a deadly curse to the python. It lost complete control of its body, and all of its scales opened up in a defensive manner. It wanted to shriek for help, but no sound came out. "Stop! Stop it! Stop playing!" The lady in green called out loud. She then rushed towards the young man in an attempt to remove the flute from his hand. With a leap, the young man steadied himself on a tree. He decided to change the tune. It started out dull, but the intensity slowly built up as he played on. As soon as the lady in green heard the melody, she became very still. Soon, she began dancing uncontrollably. The lady in green was a stunning beauty. She danced seductively in a very sexy and enticing manner. She removed her clothing piece by piece and slowly stripped down to her underwear. It was all very sexually attractive. The way she danced was like a stripper from the modern era, only wilder. Di Hao felt awkward watching the scene. As a child, he knew he should not be looking at inappropriate scenes involving adult elements. However, he was even more worried that he might miss out on any key information if he stopped looking. With the maturity of an adult, he convinced himself that the scene was not a big deal. Therefore, Di Hao contained his awkwardness and continued watching. In his vision, Gu Shizhou could be seen leaning back on a tree while being entertained by the latter's sexy moves. The giant python and the lady were dancing and slowly got closer and closer together. The giant python then spiraled to the ground and shrunk its body to about 10 feet long. It made a swoop at the lady and pinned her down on the ground. Enticingly, it slowly separated the lattice legs, so its tail could linger its way into her private part. Gu Shizhou was surprised by the plot twist. She stood up straight to see it better, but a blindfold immediately covered her eyes. That action rendered her speechless. Right at that moment, the young man started playing the melody differently. Pleasantly, the soothing tune was a balm for her agitated nerves. The melody was so loud that it managed to block out any other noise. Gu Shizhou wanted to take the blindfold away, but the young man's playful tease changed her mind. "Would you like to see? This adult imagery is nothing like you have seen before. I can take the blindfold off if you want so that we can both enjoy the show together." Gu Shizhou remained quiet. She stood frozen and decided to keep the blindfold on. "Sister." A loud and brusque man could be heard calling out loud from afar. Gu Shizhou could clearly hear quick steps approaching them. "Stop it! Stop! Damn it, make it stop!" Gu Shizhou pulled the blindfold away and saw a few men. The leader was a man with heavy brocades of a dark golden shade. His elegant outfit was a contrast to his deep, hoarse voice. Gu Shijiu recognized the man. He was the king of the monster kingdom. The other people were probably his men. As soon as the monster king approached, he launched a strike at the snake in an attempt to separate the naked woman from its grasp. The snake let out a sharp cry and became even more closely entwined with the woman. Its muscles tightened, thus squeezing the woman even more with its body almost to the point of suffocation. All of the men were confused, unsure if they should look away or stay focused on the snake. "Stay away, all of you." The Monster King was furious. Chapter 2790, Until her last breath the Monster King's men stayed away from the feud as instructed. Meanwhile, the Monster King retrieved a black rope out of nowhere and aimed the twisting cord at the python. He wanted to pull the python away from the woman. With his strength and level of kung fu, he was able to lift even the heaviest kind of load. Pulling the snake away should have been an easy matter. Indeed, he was able to pull the snake away from the ground, along with the woman that it desperately tried to mate with. The woman and the snake appeared to move in an arc across the air before taking a hard fall on the ground again. Nonetheless, their bodies were still inextricably intertwined. The woman let out a hoarse cry while slowly losing consciousness. "Feng Jie, what are you doing? Separate them now." The Monster King demanded with cries of anger. The young man kept his composure, and calmly replied, "My king, I am here to arrest the murderer who is responsible for the death of 18 girls. I am only doing what I have promised to do." Anger surged up among the two people. "I asked you to catch the murderer, not to step aside while the princess is helplessly raped. Did you ask the python to assault the princess? Don't you try to talk yourself out of this. I saw you commanding the python with your flute. The python belongs to your sister. She asked the python to attack me first, and the gentleman stepped in to help," Gu Shijiu interrupted. The Monster King carefully studied Gu Shijiu but did not recognize her. Who is this hideous woman? He began to lose his temper and added, "Feng Jie. I do not care whose python this is. Separate them now." Feng Jie folded his arms together and said, "No can do. Only the python's master can command it." He then looked at the Monster King sternly in the eye. "My king, can't you tell what python this is?" After a pause, the Monster King defended himself, "Of course I can. The python is evil. It only answers to its master, and its master is you." Feng Jie patiently explained, "What I am doing is confusing the python so it cannot recognize its master temporarily. I do not have the power to command it." He took another look at the woman. "You seem to like your pet a lot, so much so that you are not willing to let go of it from your arms." The woman was lying naked on the ground. There were some obvious bloodstains between her thighs by now. She lost control of her body under the influence of the flute, thus losing the ability to command the python. But, as soon as the melody stopped, her consciousness immediately returned. Utterly ashamed, she did not know how to face her brother, so she decided to play dead. Never had she thought that the young man could see through her little trick. Taking the python as a pet was strictly prohibited, so she was too afraid to admit that the python belonged to her. However, she also knew very well that once the python started mating, it would keep on penetrating her until her last breath. It would only stop when its master asked it to stop. If she refused to admit it, she would eventually die of exhaustion, and her soul would be crushed in the python's jaws. Therefore, in this matter of life and death, she realized she could not be stubborn any longer. Determined, she gave the python's head a hard slap. "Keep off me." She thought that the python was able to recognize her voice as the flute was no longer playing. Therefore, it should be able to think and respond to her request. But surprisingly, the python only answered to her command and not her voice. The hard slap had unleashed the python's inner beast even more, thus speeding up the movement of its tail. The lady let out a wail before quickly curling her body into a ball. The deep penetration had severely torn the lattice flesh and put her in much agony. However, the sight of blood excited the python even more, so it penetrated with an even stronger and faster rhythm. Pale and drawn, the woman could no longer care about her image. She cast a spell and created a wisp of black, skull-like smoke from the tip of her fingers. She then flicked the wisp of smoke into the python's wide-open mouth and commanded, "Ching Bai, keep out now." The spell was obviously used to control the python. Instantly, the python tensed up its muscles and untangled the woman from its body, though unwillingly. At this point, the Monster King could no longer defend his sister. What a shame! Chapter 2791, the creator of the universe. He offered the naked princess an overcoat made of crane feathers. Her body was still twitching uncontrollably on the ground due to the intensity of the pain she had to experience. She could not even stand on her own, so the Monster King had to bend down and carry her in his arms before leaving. "Are you trying to take her away so easily?" Feng Jiayi scornfully questioned. The Monster King stopped walking and glanced back at Feng Jiayi with an unrelenting look. "What more do you want? You have promised the people that once we found the murderer of the missing girls, he or she will be punished publicly by dismembering the murderer's body. Now that we have the murderer, I am wondering when you will punish the princess." The Monster King looked uncomfortable. "I know exactly what to do, so there is no need for your concern. Brother, this couple has made some evil plots against me. Please, get revenge for me, brother." The woman pleaded with her brother, "Brother, do not let them go. We have to uphold the reputation of our royal family." The Monster King was inspired to kill. His sister was right. In order to protect the name of his family, the couple had to die. "Take them," he commanded. All of his men quickly gathered around the two outsiders. The Monster King's facial expression darkened. These people have the audacity to belittle the royalty of the Monster Kingdom. "Cease them." However, a sudden voice interrupted him, "Yao Xingye, how have you been doing?" Much to his surprise, he looked around and saw the hideous woman under the tree. She was no longer her mundane self. Instead, streaks of brilliance started surrounding her body and slowly stripping away her disguise. When the light faded, a beautiful woman in a green magic dress was standing under the tree. There was an emerald magic wand in her hand. The Monster King was utterly shocked. She was the creator of the universe. He once saw Gu Shijiu from afar when he visited the valley. She looked exactly the same as she wore the same outfit. The Monster King was dumbstruck, and so were his men. At this very moment, Gu Zijia's aura was extremely intimidating, unlike before. She did not look anything like the woman they had seen earlier. Feng Jiayi was shocked as well. He was about to play his flute to defend them, but seeing Gu Shijiu changed his mind. "My divine lord." The Monster King knelt along with his men. Gu Shijiu heaved a sigh of relief. Her kung fu was already depleting, but the look in her eyes remained murderous. She could tell that the Monster King wanted her and Feng Jiayi dead just moments ago. His spiritual power was almost at the level of a great deity. Furthermore, all of his men were among the most powerful and experienced fighters in the Monster Kingdom. Even with Feng Jiayi's help, their combined strength would not be sufficient to fight them off. They might even die here in the wild. Fortunately for Gu Shijiu, death would never truly dawn on her. Her physical body might not survive, but her soul would remain. Nonetheless, she would need at least a decade to create a new body from elementary particles. Time was her only concern right now, and there was not much of it left for her. She had no choice but to reveal her true self. Fortunately, the Monster King was indeed intimidated. None of his men dared to take any moves. Then, Gu Shijiu took a look at the prostrate figure on the ground and asked, "How do you plan to deal with your sister?" The Monster King stammered, "About that," panicked, cold sweat started breaking out on his forehead. He was a loving brother who doted on his sister. Never had he thought that his beloved sister would become involved in such a terrible mistake. In recent years, many girls had lost their virginity, and eventually their lives, to an unknown murderous creature. Some of these victims were the common people of the monster kingdom. Some were even the daughters belonging to noble families. 2 cabinet ministers had also lost their beloved daughters to the murderer. Hence, the death toll had caused great alarm to the people. The Monster King had sent out many of his men to investigate the matter, but the case remained unsolved. Chapter 2792, Even I Have Become Your Tool. Royal notices were posted and placed all over the kingdom in hopes that someone would take the initiative to solve the case. 3 days later, a man came volunteering. He was Feng Jie. Feng Jie went to see the Monster King in secret, so the princess knew nothing about this man. He promised that he would solve the case in 7 days, but he only took 5 days to find the murderer. He intended to expose her in the glare of the public eye. Luckily, the Monster King only brought his servants with him. The victims' families were not notified about the incident yet, so he wanted to silence the witnesses by killing them off. Little did he know that one of the witnesses was actually the creator of the universe. Fake. She is a fake. The princess suddenly called out loud. Qing Bai almost killed her just now. Without Feng Jie, she would already be dead. How could the creator of the universe be so easily defeated by a venomous python? She is an imposter. She is surely a fake. The Monster Kingdom was not ready to give up their princess. Hence, she needed to convince everyone that Gu Shizhou was an imposter. As expected, the Monster King lowered his head and asked his sister quietly, "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." The Monster King gave Gu Shizhou a murderous look. There is a death penalty to anyone who impersonates the creator of the universe. As the Monster King was not quite sure that she was really an imposter, he tried to be polite first. He wanted to challenge her to a duel so that he could tell if she was really as powerful as he had heard. Suddenly, he heard a collection of footsteps closing in. Where is the murderer? Damn it! We finally have the murderer. I am going to tear the murderer into pieces. They were chants for the death of the murderer. These were the people of the Monster Kingdom, and also the families of the victims. The cabinet ministers were also there among the crowd. They caught Gu Shizhou standing at the side and were dumbstruck. The 2 cabinet ministers' eyes opened wide in shock. The divine creator of the universe is here. I hereby bow before you, divine lord. They instantly fell to their knees. Divine lord, I did not know that you are here. Divine lord, my daughter died a tragic death. Please help us. Rest assured that the murderer is caught since we have the divine lord here with us. That is right. Mr. Feng once told us that the melody was a signal. When the melody was played, it also meant that the murderer was arrested. So, where is the murderer? The crowd effervesced with frustration. With a smile, Feng Jie looked at the Monster King and said, "My king, the venomous python was misused by your sister to harm the innocent. You have seen it all. The devil venomous python is also prohibited in all of the 6 worlds. The owner has to be sentenced to death. Will you give the people a proper explanation of the situation?" The Monster King felt all hope was lost. When the truth was exposed in the public eye, there was no way he could help his sister. He took a look at Gu Shizhou, who was standing in the distance, surrounded by a layer of divine aura. An imposter could have easily faked her looks, but the divine aura of the creator of the universe could not have been imitated. She was indeed the almighty creator of the universe. Determined, he tossed the woman on the ground and furiously said, "Yao Tingting, look what you've done. Take her down. We shall dismember her to death." Tranquility had once again returned to the wilderness when everyone left. Before the Monster King left, he invited Gu Shizhou to the Monster Palace as a guest, but his invitation was turned down immediately. Gu Shizhou had things to attend to. The Monster King did not push it any further and quickly left. In the end, Gu Shizhou and Feng Jie were the only ones left in the wild. Gu Shizhou sat on top of a stone and looked at him condescendingly. The plan was great. Even I have become your tool. Chapter 2793, Don't worry, I am not sending you away. Gu Shizhou was smart enough to link everything that happened together in an instant. This man must have noticed that the princess was the culprit for a while now. Knowing that she would most likely be interested in handsome men, he needed to trigger her jealousy by doing things that were completely out of her expectation. Back in the restaurant, he purposely showed his kindness to the woman who was seen as hideous by the public. The princess had, as expected, become utterly jealous and thus initiated a series of brutal remarks and actions. Feng Jiayi knew very well that everything was going as he planned, so he notified the victims' families in advance. The Monster King was not the only one who had received the invitation. The princess needed to be exposed in the eyes of the public and punished in a way that she deserved. Gu Shizhou studied Feng Jiayi for a while and was impressed by his perception and wit, even though he was only a young man. "I am sorry," Feng Jiayi suddenly apologized. Gu Shizhou cleared her throat to dissolve the awkwardness. Now that he had apologized, she should let the matter go. After all, the princess deserved it. A sudden grasp by her wrist interrupted her. Baffled, she had never encountered such disrespect in her life. She wanted to push his hand away, but he pulled her toward him instead. "This is not the place to talk. Follow me." Soon, Gu Zijia's vision turned black. The man had already initiated the ground drilling technique. Gu Shizhou was still perplexed. "What are you doing?" "Don't worry. I am not going to send you away." Feng Jiayi did not look back and continued drilling. Gu Shizhou knew that he was not strong enough to hurt her. Stirred by curiosity, she decided to let him guide the way. After a moment, Gu Shizhou noticed that something was not quite right. Usually, ground drillings would only cover a relatively short distance. One would usually use it for 100 miles at most. Under normal circumstances, one would need to head back up to catch a breath every hour. Not even a great deity's physique could handle the harsh underground conditions. However, Feng Jiayi was able to use the ground drilling technique for over 6 hours straight without stopping for a rest. Also, his speed was impressive. Gu Shizhou assumed that they had both traveled for at least 600 miles in total. Fortunately, Gu Shizhou was the creator of the universe. Even with her power being greatly depleted, ground drilling would not pose any danger to her. She was able to survive all day being underground. However, the young man was obviously not as strong as her. How did he manage to survive all day? Icy peaks and snow-capped mountains rose up from the land amid the white snow. From where they stood, they could see a glacier that had been around since forever. She looked up and was impressed by the mighty mountain that had its icy summit above the clouds. Gu Shizhou did not expect to see snow as soon as they resurfaced. At the same time, cold winds blew by, swirling snowflakes in the air. She could not help but shudder in the cold. For the first time, she thought that her clothes might be a little too thin for the weather. She took a look at Feng Jiayi. His clothes were obviously not made for the cold, but he did not seem to be bothered. There he stood, tall and straight, seemingly unconcerned by the icy peaks and the brutal winter winds. He opened up an umbrella to shelter her from the snow. "Are you feeling cold?" He fixed his eyes on her pale white face as he asked her. Gu Shizhou took a deep breath and rubbed her numb hands together for warmth. "I am not afraid of the cold. Why did you take us here?" She steadied herself and calmly remarked. Feng Jiayi sized her up before continuing, "If I am not mistaken, your spiritual power is less than the strength of a golden immortal now. Why do you have to keep playing tough?" Astonished, Gu Shizhou looked at him with a rather spurious smile. Underneath her sleeves, she quietly cast a spell on her fingertips. So, if something went wrong, she could easily escape. Chapter 2794, Why didn't you listen to me? Even if she could not kill him, she was strong enough to cause some injuries, at least. Feng Jiayi put the umbrella in her hand and said, "Take this. The umbrella can keep you warm. Stay here, and don't go anywhere. I will be back very soon." He made a turn and disappeared in the snow. Gu Zijiu was bewildered. The umbrella was surely a magical item, like a midsummer sun, it was able to keep her warm by blocking out the cold. Gu Shizhou then took a look at her surroundings. The place was a solitary snow land of extreme cold. The uncharted territory was virtually uninhabited. In fact, she had never been to this place before. However, the spiritual energy of the place was rather fascinating. Eddies of spiritual power surrounded her in swirls of chilly air currents. She put her hand into the eddy of chill air and could immediately feel the cold that sunk into her bones like icy thorns. Apart from the cold, there was also a small degree of spiritual energy that was equally penetrating. Her eyes glimpsed with hope at the sight. Her condition had been deteriorating over the past years, and no amount of spiritual energy could refuel her strength. She could not even absorb the spiritual energy around her, even during intense meditations. Therefore, her spiritual power had become progressively worse. Nevertheless, her body did not seem to repel the richness of spiritual energy here. With a light grasp in the air, the source of spiritual energy was immediately absorbed and channeled right to her spiritual core. The encounter felt like refreshing rain pouring down after a long drought. Feeling hopeful enough, Gu Shizhou kept the umbrella away and lunged for the swirls of spiritual aura in her surroundings. A vortex of rotating winds carried snowflakes in the whirl. She took a leap in an attempt to fly but lost her balance instead and staggered. Apparently, the place seemed to forbid the use of spells. She steadied herself to make another attempt and flicked her finger to cast a spell but could not unleash any force of seven-colored light. Only a small whiff was produced that did not even leave a mark on the snow's surface. She started wondering about the nature of the place. She was troubled but was not ready to give up, for she had not encountered such a rich source of spiritual energy in a long while. Determined, she continued to chase after the vortex. She intended to go straight to the core of the vortex, where the source of spiritual energy was the most abundant. Unfortunately, she could not get out of the vortex after finding her way in. To her surprise, the air current in the center was much stronger than she thought. As soon as the strong whirl approached, her entire body was swept away in the vortex. Apart from the current, the temperature of the vortex was below the freezing point. Therefore, all of her veins were instantaneously frozen in the cold. Naturally, her body became rigid and was carried away helplessly by the wind as she traveled higher and higher above ground. Nonetheless, only her body was frozen. Her mind remained fully conscious. In a panicked state, the rotating winds certainly caused a stir in her heart as well. Perhaps it was finally the time for her to give up on the body. When the wind ceased, she would fall to her death from this height. But just when she thought all hope was lost, a long rope suddenly appeared from outside of the vortex and caught her by the waist. She continued to float in the wind before the rope was pulled. After a brief moment, she managed to break free from the everlasting circular motion and found herself suspended in the air about 20 feet above the ground. In an instant, her body started falling towards a person on the ground. Regrettably, her body was frozen, so she did not have any control over it. She could not even open her mouth to ask for help. Bam! She fell into the arms of a man. The sudden impact plunged him backward. He had to take a few steps back to absorb the impact of her fall. Finally, he put her down and circled her frozen body for a while. "Didn't I tell you to stay still? Why didn't you listen to me?" He sounded troubled. Chapter 2795, Is this your actual appearance? Gu Shizhou remained quiet. She was stunned by the fact that someone was actually treating her like a child who had just misbehaved. Feng Jiayi circled Gu Shizhou 2 times to study her condition. He cast a few different spells to defrost her icy body, but they were ineffective. Even the magic umbrella had no effect on her this time. Troubled, he heaved a long sigh. "I have not thought that saving the creator of the universe could be so troublesome. It looks like I am a busybody who stuck his hands in the wrong place." The remark rendered Gu Shizhou speechless. It was true that if he had not brought her here, she would not have turned into a big ice block. Having pondered the situation, Feng Jiayi suddenly walked away and left her alone. Gu Shizhou was obviously shocked by his sudden departure. She watched as he disappeared into the distance. Finally, she could no longer keep calm and became distressed by her current predicament. Was he really planning to leave her alone here as an ice statue? What a bastard, she thought. The vast snow land was apparently an unfrequented wilderness. Hardly anyone would set forth into this icy territory. Perhaps, she would have to remain as an ice statue until the day when her immortalization finally dawned on her. She was not afraid of her death but was worried about her mission. As a last resort, she closed her eyes in an attempt to extract her soul from her dying body. She did not want to give up on her body so easily, but it seemed that she had no other choice. The process of extracting one's soul was not comfortable at all. It would be even more difficult under her current frozen circumstance. While she was halfway through the extraction, a sudden glimpse of purple flashed before her eyes. Gu Shizhou stopped what she was doing to have a proper look at the man who was approaching her. The man was dressed entirely in purple, and his silky hair was almost waist-length, fastened by a headband that was decorated with a crimson gem in the shape of a fox's eye. The beauty that he possessed was ethereal. His physical outlook did not matter to her, nonetheless, she could not help but find the man a little familiar. Who is the man? She wondered. He stopped right in front of her. Being much taller, he fixed his eyes on her from above, thus exuding a sense of authority. He had a rather odd expression on his face, suggesting that he was conflicted. He sighed before uttering, "You are the first person to see my face." Gu Shizhou was shocked. Just by hearing the man's sentence, she was able to deduce his identity. The man was, surprisingly, Feng Jiai. Why did he walk away earlier? Was it only to change his appearance? She continued to study him and found more surprising facts about the man. Along with his new appearance, his spiritual power had also significantly increased. His body was surrounded by a heavenly aura of auspicious light that could not be detected by the naked eye. Nonetheless, Gu Shizhou could still see it. How did he manage to possess such divine qualities? She had the same aura of divinity, and so did Fan Qianshi, only weaker. Gu Shizhou assumed that Fan Qianshi was a celestial baby that was created from the essence of heaven and earth simply because of the heavenly aura that he exudes. Feng Jiai, whose name was unknown to her, had the same auspicious aura, only that it was even purer than the aura that Fan Qianshi possessed. Was he a celestial baby, too? Gu Shizhou had so many questions, but could not say a word. Please excuse me, Feng Jiai suddenly said. Gu Shizhou was perplexed by his lack of explanation. He cast spells on both his hands before placing one hand on her stomach and the other on her back. Two steady streams of energy slowly entered her body. About an hour later, Gu Shizhou was freed. She held the umbrella in her hand and looked at him in bewilderment. You are still Feng Jiai, aren't you? Tell me, what is this all about? D is my surname. My name is Fui. The man in purple continued, Feng Jiai is one of my many identities. Gu Shizhou suddenly made sense of the whole situation. Is this your actual appearance? She sized him up at that very moment. Chapter 2796, The Mysterious Young Man. She continued with another question, what do you mean by one of your many identities? I carry several identities to cover up who I really am, Di Fui briefly explained. Gu Shizhou could no longer hide her surprise. The man could carry other identities with weaker spiritual power and strength to conceal his true self. During the peak of her power, Gu Shizhou was also able to create other identities too. However, her extended period of inactivity had stripped that power away. It seemed that this man must be someone powerful, for he was able to conceal his true self so well. This made her even more curious about his actual identity. Abruptly, she held his wrist. Di Fui did not push her hand away, though he was surprised by her sudden action. What is this for? Gu Shizhou slowly let go of his hand, as if in disbelief. You are only 22 years old. The method that she had just used to check his age was the bone-touching skill, which had never been incorrect when determining one's age. Di Fui gave her a quick glance before taking back his hand. I am impressed by the precision of your foretelling. You truly are the creator of the universe. Tell me more about you, Gu Shizhou sternly said. Di Fui suddenly let out a good laugh. Divine Lord, you and I have only just met. It is inappropriate for you to study my background so quickly, isn't it? He was obviously reluctant to share about his past, but Gu Shizhou refused to step back. Did you come into this world without any parents? Did the essence of heaven and earth create you? She was perplexed by his lack of popularity. Usually, a child birthed by the essence of heaven and earth would be highly appraised and valued by society, which would then lead to a series of fights to take possession of the child. How did Di Fui stay anonymous for so long? Gu Shizhou had never heard of his name anywhere before. Di Fui seemed offended. He didn't answer Gu Zijia's question, but instead, he threw her a bright piece of thin red cloth and said, "Put this on. It can keep you safe in the vortex of spiritual winds." He then walked away. Slightly disappointed, Gu Shizhou knew that she had no way of making the man tell the truth. She decided to keep her questions aside for now. As soon as she opened up the red cloth, a brief touch was enough for her to tell the value of the scarce fabric. It was a piece of sunbeam fabric. Legends have it that the mermaids actually weaved the fabric by mixing the rays of sunlight with fresh blood of their own. The cloth produced was able to keep away wind and dust, thus providing its bearer with warmth. Gu Shizhou guessed that the reason Di Fui had left earlier was to get this cloth for her. Nonetheless, other thoughts popped up in her mind. The young man seemed to know the place well. Was this where he grew up? She shook her head to dismiss the thoughts at once, for there were other agendas of higher priority right now. She put on the red cloth and felt as if it was fueled by enormous energy from the sun. All of a sudden, a swirling vortex of winds swung by, so she dived right in. With the protective red cloth, she was no longer bothered by the blowing gales of the vortex. The extreme cold became tolerable. In fact, all she could feel now was the abundance of spiritual energy in the vortex. Gu Shizhou spent the next month absorbing the spiritual energy that the land had to offer. Di Fui never showed up during that time. It would seem that she was abandoned in the icy hills alone. Gu Shizhou finally broke free from her stillness in the vortex and walked away in a fresh new display of vitality. Cold winds continued to roam the ridge of ice, but she could hardly feel any discomfort. In a month, her power had recovered by more than 20%. With this amount of power, the cold would not pose a threat to her. Being naturally curious, Gu Shizhou wanted to find out more about the place. She had traveled to almost every corner of the land but could not find any exits. The place was like a self-sustaining environment that had no connections to the outside world. She was worried about her disciple, Fan Qianshi, and her closest servant, Wu Qianyan. She had never been away from them for this long. They must be worried about her. Gu Shizhou took a walk around the snow-capped mountain to look for Di Fui, but could not see him anywhere. To her surprise, she found a stream of fog between the sky and the summit of the mountain. The violent torrents seemed to roll thunderously in that path of fog. She decided to leap into the fog to see if the torrents could lead her all the way out. As soon as she went into the torrents, she could feel her body being lifted in a dazzling swirl. When she finally landed, she was surprised to find herself standing by a hillside, which she found familiar. She soon realized that it was the outskirts of the monster kingdom. However, it was at least 1,000 miles away from the restaurant that she once feasted with Di Fui, but only 100 miles away from Fanyin Valley. Master! Gu Shizhou was interrupted by a sudden voice that called out for her from afar. She looked up and saw Fan Qianshi. Excited by the sight of her, he tripped over a stone and swayed a little, but he was not bothered. He continued to walk up to her in disbelief. Master. Chapter 2797, This was revenge. Gu Shizhou was infuriated by how he looked. Why do you look so shabby? Fan Qianshi was no longer in clean clothes and his usual grace. Instead, he looked like a complete mess. His robes were all crumbled and even torn. Furthermore, the coarse texture of his hair was unbearable to the eye. He must have left his hair unwashed for a long time. Drawn and pale, he had obviously lost a lot of weight since she last saw him. Gu Shijiu was never one who cared about beauty. Nonetheless, she was annoyed by his shabbiness. Fan Qianzhi finally understood Gu Zijia's concern. Abruptly, he stopped walking toward her and gave an apologetic bow. "Master, I will be back soon." He then left. His sudden change surprised Gu Shijiu, to say the least. It did not take him long to come back. Only this time, he came back as a new person. His robes were neat and tidy, which finally matched his effortless grace. "Master, you have finally come back. I have been looking for you for long enough." Fan Qianzhi seemed relieved by the sight of her. His eyes lingered on her suggestively, as he took a step closer to her. Needless to say, he was too fearful to do anything inappropriate. "Master, where have you been? People from all 6 worlds have been looking for you. I was worried that something bad happened, so I kept looking everywhere for you." "Have they been looking for me? What for?" Gu Shijiu was confused. She was not surprised by her disciple's effort to locate her, as she had never been away from him for so long. However, her lack of involvement in the 6 worlds had never caused any problems before. She hardly even showed herself in front of the common people throughout the course of her life. Hence, her month-long disappearance should not be a big deal at all to them. "Monster, the Monster King visited almost a month ago, stating that he needed to apologize to you personally. I was away, pondering over my mistake in isolation, so Qian Yan was the one who stopped him. She told him that you were away and asked him to come back some other time, but he said there was something urgent that he needed to talk to you about. Qian Yan did not know what to do, so she came to see me. I was concerned, too, that it could be a matter of urgency, so I tried to contact you, but failed." Leaving him no choice, he then left. However, he did not give up. He came back the next day, along with the Emperor Immortal, and stormed their way in. Qian Yan and I watched helplessly as they turned Fanyin Valley inside out. They could not find you anywhere, so they accused us of having an ulterior motive behind your disappearance, saying that we must have harmed the creator of the universe. Qian Yan was held hostage while I was told to locate you in a month. If I failed, they would put Qian Yan to death by dismembering her body as a warning. The news came as a shock to all 6 worlds, so everyone started looking for you." Gu Shijiu clenched her fist in frustration. This was revenge. It was revenge for bringing death upon the Monster King's beloved sister. The Monster King was suspicious of her power and wanted to test her strength, but was interrupted by the people who Di Fui had invited over. After the Monster King left, Di Fui also took Gu Shijiu away in a hasty departure. The Monster King must have returned to the same place to look for her, but could not find her anywhere in the Monster Kingdom. Unable to accept his defeat, he decided to make his way to Fanyin Valley to find out the truth. In Gu Zijia's absence, he dared to take her servant away as a hostage. "Where did they keep Qian Yan? Have you heard any news from the Monster Kingdom?" With a pause, Fan Qianzhi finally uttered, "I have been busy trying to locate you." In other words, he had never tried to find out more about Wu Qianyan's whereabouts. Perhaps, he did not care much about her life. Wu Qianyan was his childhood friend, someone whom he grew up with. Wu Qianyan had never disobeyed his words. She had implicit faith in him. Many times, she had risked her life just to keep him safe, but the connection did not necessarily imply a deep friendship. Now that Wu Qianyan was suffering in agony, Fan Qianzhi did not seem to be bothered at all. Gu Shijiu gave Fan Qianzhi a judgmental look. The boy was a little cold-blooded. However, if he ever became the creator of the universe, it would be good for him to have no personal entanglements so that he could be clear and unbiased in his executions. Perhaps his lack of emotions was a bonus. Either way, Gu Shijiu shook her head to dismiss the problem as it was not her first priority at the moment. She did some calculations and realized that there were 2 days left until the deadline given by the Monster King. Hence, she sent Fan Qianzhi away to the Monster Kingdom to collect as much information as he could about Wu Qianyan's whereabouts. Fan Qianxue could no longer keep his eyes open as he swayed and tumbled forward into Gu Zijia's arms. Gu Shizhou quickly held him up and asked, "What is wrong?" Fan Qianxue had to lean on Gu Shizhou to keep his balance. His entire forehead was drenched in cold sweats. I am too tired." Troubled, Gu Shizhou quickly read his pulse and was surprised by his lack of vitality, which was attributable to overwork and his lack of proper rest. "When did you last sleep?" Gu Shizhou asked. "I have not had any rest since the day of your disappearance, but don't worry, I am still holding on." "I will now go and find out more about Qian Yan," he reassured. He tried to steady himself, but his stubbornness only worsened his condition. He could not even keep his body straight. At this point, he was already sweating uncontrollably. Gu Shizhou could not bear to see him in such a condition. Fan Qianxue turned to look at her. His eyes glimpsed with delight. "Is there anything else that you need, master?" Gu Shizhou did not look at him but raised her hand and tossed him a bottle of pills. "Take 2 pills to help revitalize your body." "All right, now go." Fan Qianxue took a look at the bottle in his hand and became slightly disappointed. "Yes, master." He then left. Gu Shizhou watched as Fan Qianxue slowly disappeared and gave an expression of disapproval. She knew what Fan Qianxue was thinking. He was clearly hoping that he could stay by her side. He was actually very reluctant to go. However, the more he wanted to stay, the more she had to make him go. Gu Shizhou did not stay for long before returning to Fanyin Valley. The place had been completely ransacked. Many things were lost, including the herbs and magical items that remained unknown even to her closest disciple. Luckily, she had kept away some of the most important herbs and magical items in her personal storage bag. Otherwise, the theft would have totally cleared her out. She took a look at the signs on her palm and let out an expression of contempt. With the recovery of her spiritual power, perhaps she could finally teach the Monster King a lesson. The most interesting news that had been circulating in the Monster Kingdom was about Wu Qianyan, the female servant of the creator deity, who was accused of murdering her master and would be punished by dismemberment on a full moon night. The monster princess was supposed to be punished first, but according to the law of the Monster Kingdom, only one criminal could be punished by dismemberment in a month. Since they agreed to punish Wu Qianyan first, the death penalty of the monster princess, Yao Tingting, was postponed until a month later. Gu Shizhou heard about the news when she first arrived in the capital of the Monster Kingdom, Lanhua City. She had her face disguised before meeting up with Fan Qianxue, who had arrived a day before. Together, they entered a restaurant. The restaurant was a place where gossips were widespread. She heard about the news from the people around her while she was eating. Chapter 2798, What If I Died? The Monster King had arranged everything well. Wu Qianyan's penalty was expected to be carried out by the end of the day. Hence, they still had 8 hours. Gu Shizhou was glad that she made her return at the right time. Otherwise, the only thing that would be waiting for her was Wu Qianyan's dead body. She gave Fan Qianxue a quick look and asked, "If I did not return, would you really let Qianyan die?" After a short pause, Fan Qianxue murmured, "Yes." He knew what Gu Shizhou was expecting him to answer. He could give her an answer that she wished to hear, but he did not want to lie to her. Perhaps, there was no way he could lie to her even if he wanted to. Lying was essentially part of his life, but never to his master. He never had the courage or the heart to lie in front of Gu Shizhou. "Master, she is only a servant," Fan Qianxue added arrogantly. Gu Shizhou was at a loss of words from his arrogance. "Qianxue, is there anything that will make you risk your life?" "There is you, master." Fan Qianxue answered frankly. Gu Shizhou continued, "What if I died? You are the creator of the universe, master. How can you ever die? You should not even joke about it. What if? I am certain that every life form on all 6 worlds will be sent to the grave along with your death." Gu Shizhou was utterly disappointed by his answer. "Damn it!" she called out while banging the table furiously with her chopsticks. Panicked, Fan Qianzhi fell to his knees and said nothing more. Gu Shizhou was troubled. The creator of the universe would be the one controlling all 6 worlds. It was forbidden for that person to have any personal entanglements, but one needed to have mercy and compassion so that life could flourish. If the creator of the universe were a man of selfishness, cruelty, and bigotry, all 6 worlds would be inescapably doomed. All of a sudden, she felt that years of her patience and guidance had gone to waste. The more she looked at him, the more she became speechless with rage. It was only a question that she simply asked through directed audios to test him, but the result was obviously unexpected. Nonetheless, it was not time for her to teach him a lesson. Gu Shizhou stared helplessly at him for a while before leaving in silence. Fan Qianzhi waited to be reprimanded but did not hear a word from Gu Shizhou. He looked up and was surprised by her absence. Troubled, he stood right up and was ready to leave, but the waiter stopped him. "Mister, the bill will be 100 pieces of spiritual pearls." Fan Qianzhi tossed him a bag of 300 spiritual pearls. "Take it." He then left swiftly. Dismembering a prisoner was a punishment that was deemed brutal, but that did not stop the curious public from flooding in to watch. The execution ground was set to be at Lanyue City's biggest square. There was a scaffold, built with a pillar in the center. Chains of red metal secured the wire fence. Needless to say, the scaffold was where the dismemberment would be carried out. It was still early, and yet the place was already crowded. Gu Shizhou took a turn around the square. She could tell that the place was already installed with many secret doors. Through teleportation, she went a door and realized that there were troops ready at every corner. Every soldier was equipped with a sword as well as a bow and arrows. What do you think? Is it necessary for the Monster King to send out so many troops to dismember a disciple who is found to be guilty of killing her master? Does he really need 30,000 soldiers to be gathered here? That is right. It is unnecessary. There is no way she can run away. Besides, who will be here to save her? Chapter 2799. It was indeed a well-thought plan, it is hard to tell. I heard that the creator of the universe also took a boy as her disciple. His power should not be underestimated. He grew up with Wu Qianyan, so he could be here to raid the execution ground and rescue the condemned. It is possible, but he has only been with the creator of the universe for 5 years. How strong can he possibly be? If he shows up alone, even our general can take care of him single-handedly. We might not even be able to help. Like what the king told us, no matter who shows up at the execution ground today to save Wu Qianyan, they should be found equally guilty, which is punishable by death. Our swords are equipped with the strongest kind poison, killing the person even with the slightest scratch. All of us only have to be careful not to injure our own men. Also, the king warned us that Fan Qianzhi is exceptionally cunning. He could show up today as an impersonation of the creator of the universe to fool us all. The king told us to have no concerns when we fight as the impostor cannot intimidate us with his fake power. The scandal set tongues wagging, so Gu Shizhou was able to collect a lot of information from the heated discussion. Smilingly, she listened to their conversations in total contempt. Obviously, the person that the Monster King truly wanted to defeat was Gu Shizhou, the one and only creator of the universe. Wu Qianyan was only taken as bait. The Monster King must have thought that it was a good chance for him to finish her off, now that her kung fu was not as strong as before. It was all but a trap, waiting for her to fall right into it. If she rushed her way to the execution ground to save Wu Qianyan, the Monster King would brand her as an impostor. Perhaps he would even push her into a fight. If defeated, the Monster King would take the victory to build his own reputation, which would further reinforce his status as their leader. If she won the fight, the Monster King could easily get away by making up an excuse. He could say that the fight was necessary to make sure that she was the genuine creator of the universe. Surely, if she refused to show up, Wu Qianyan would be brought to death by dismemberment. Even the reason for her death was so legitimately made to fool the public. The Monster King could exercise many options, regardless of the situation. It was indeed a well-thought plan. Gu Shizhou took a look at the poison on the swords and could not help but jeer at these armed men. She was the creator of the universe, born with immunity against all poisons. These arrows would only cause an uncomfortable sensation on her skin without any actual harm. She took a swift leap across the air, which caught the attention of the people nearby. These soldiers could tell that someone was there. Alerted, all of them flashed their weapons at the intruder, but there was no intruder in sight. "Who is there?" one of the officers shouted out loud. The only answer that they could hear was the sound of the wind whistling through the door, sending cold chills down their spine. Aghast, they looked at one another helplessly. "Did you see anyone?" the officer asked his men. All of the armed men shook their heads. Could it be? Could it be the creator of the universe? She must be mad at us for taking away her servant. It cannot be. If she is here, the one that she should be looking for is the king. Why would she come here to scare us? "Officer, should we report this to the king?" After giving it much thought, the officer decided that it was a bad idea. "No need, perhaps it was only a mistake. If it is found to be a false report, death will await us." The Monster King was a ruthless man. The officer should not take the report to the king without a clear description of the intruder's appearance and capabilities. That would only result in punishment for the officer. Chapter 2800, Meeting again. The officer's daughter was one of the many victims that were killed by the princess. Although the princess was sentenced to death, the penalty had yet to be carried out. Knowing how much the Monster King actually cared for his sister, many things could still happen before the princess was truly dismembered. In order to minimize any potential trouble, the officer decided not to report the incident so that the Monster King had one less thing to worry about. These armed men were loyal to the officer, so they would surely listen to his every command. A timid man fearfully asked, "Officer, if the intruder is really the creator of the universe, should we attack her when she shows up later?" The officer firmly shook his head in disapproval. "No. Legend has it that anyone who does any harm to the creator of the universe shall be punished by God and lead a miserable life. The creator of the universe caught the murderer who killed his daughter, so the officer respected her. He could not care less if the intruder was only an impostor, he would never allow his men to do any harm to her." His men were bewildered, for they had never heard of any legends that forbade anyone from harming the creator of the universe. However, they unquestionably believed everything that the officer said. Gu Shizhou listened to their conversation from a hidden corner and was amused. She had never heard of such sayings either. It seemed like the officer was only trying to scare off his men. In fact, she was not expecting anyone from the enemy to actually be on her side, so this came as a surprise to her. Gu Shizhou paid a few visits to different groups of soldiers in the same manner as she did before. Her surprise visits had caused great alarm. Some even thought it could be a paranormal encounter. Others thought that it was a warning sign from the creator of the universe. The armed men had become anxious and doubtful. However, they were more worried about being punished by the Monster King if they did not do their job, so none of the officers reported the incident to the authority. Certainly, many of them had their own thoughts about what they would do when the creator showed up. Some were simply not ready to bear the title of being the murderer of a divine being. Before they could be sure that the person was an impostor, they would choose to hold their weapons, or at most, act like they were fighting. Gu Shizhou took less than an hour to terrorize the soldiers. Relieved, the false alarm had solved some of her major problems. With the recovery of her strength, it should be enough for her to take care of the Monster King alone. If the soldiers could stay out of the fight, she was confident that she would win. With that out of the way, she then proceeded to the prison. In the past, the people of the Monster Kingdom actually rebelled against him due to his ruthlessness, but eventually, these people were arrested and put away in prison. In order to prevent these problematic people from escaping, the Monster King had to build a stronger prison, reinforced with a bastion made of iron. Gu Shizhou took a walk around the prison and was shocked. All of these walls were carved with a series of incantations and symbols. With these reinforcements, all kinds of spells would fail to penetrate through the wall. She gently touched the carvings on the wall and found that the traces were somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she last encountered the same traces. Without wasting any more time, she went straight into the prison by teleportation. Her teleportation skill was a special power that only the creator of the universe possessed. During that time, no amount of incantations or spells could stop her. The inside of the prison was dark and cold. Every cell housed a criminal that was severely punished. All of them looked equally unwashed and unkempt. Some of them lay quietly on the ground, unconscious, while others were groaning in pain. Frustrated by the brutal sight, Gu Shizhou could already foresee Wu Qianyan's mistreatment. She closed her eyes to trace Wu Qianyan's scent in the prison, but to no avail. She was surprised by the result, as she could generally sense anyone within a 3-mile radius. Chapter 2801, Meeting Again. 2. The prison was not too big, so the area was definitely confined within 3 miles. She should be able to sense her presence if Wu Qianyan was held captive here. Had the Monster King concealed Qianyan's aura? Or was she even in the prison at all to begin with? If she could not find her here, the only way left for her to find her servant was to raid the execution ground. "Mister, this way please." Gu Shizhou could hear the Monster King's voice from around the corner as the sound of footsteps was slowly closing in. Gu Shizhou lounged in the corner of the corridor and became invisible in the dark. Soon, a group of people came in. The first one from the group was the Monster King. Next to him was a man in purple. They were followed by a group of soldiers that the Monster King trusted most. Gu Shizhou gasped in disbelief as soon as she saw the man in purple. His entire face was concealed under a mask painted with ghostly features. She could only see his big, watery eyes shining brightly in the dark. Could the man be Di Fui? His physique certainly resembled Di Fui's. Why was he here? Hadn't his relationship with the Monster King fallen through? Nonetheless, it was possible that the man was not Di Fui. Maybe they happened to share similar features. She stood in the dark, contemplating the situation. Abruptly, the man in purple threw her a quick glance, followed by a frown. Panicked, Gu Shizhou could not help but think if he had seen her. No one had ever seen through her invisibility skill, so it was rather unlikely that the people in front of her could see her. It was only a quick glance before the man in purple looked away and continued walking next to the Monster King as if nothing had happened. Perhaps, she had overthought. Gu Shizhou was curious about what would happen next, so she followed the group of people from behind. She then overheard the conversation that was exchanged through directed audios between the mysterious man and the Monster King. The brutal content of their conversation sent chills down her spine. The Monster King asked, "Mister, can the princess really use Wu Qianyan's lungs?" The man in purple answered, "Well, you can choose to doubt me. I trust you, mister. Without your miraculous skills that work wonders, my sister would be long dead. I was only asking because I was curious. I have not heard that replacing organs is actually possible. Have you not heard about the case where an entire head was replaced? Haven't I performed it to you before? The soldiers were still well and alive even after I exchanged their heads. If I can deal with a head replacement, replacing a pair of lungs would be considered child's play." The Monster King heaved a sigh of relief and replied, "I know very well that you have magic hands that restore health. I trust you and your skills. After replacing my sister's injured lungs, I shall need your help to swap the heads of my sister and the servant. Only then can my sister escape death." The man in purple glanced at the Monster King. "Are you planning to use the servant as a replacement for the princess by making her face the punishment on her behalf?" The Monster King paused for a while but did not intend to lie. "Of course. I am only sacrificing the worthless servant for the precious life of the princess. She should feel lucky for this opportunity. Are you against it?" The man in purple casually flicked his robes and gently replied, "My mission is to help people who are in need of my medical skills. I do not care about anything else. If you are able to pay me well, the princess will only be a patient of mine and not a prisoner." Relieved, the Monster King laughed out loud. "You are truly an understanding man." He then added, Wu Qianyan is already dying. Her sacrifice will be a great service to my sister. Her death will not be in vain. The man in purple calmly said, I am only concerned that she will scream aloud later on the scaffold, thus defaming your good name. You should take the matter seriously. The Monster King gave him a serious look. That is all right. You can mute her, so there is no way she can speak. She will have to accept her own death. Chapter 2802, Meeting Again, 3, The man in purple answered nonchalantly, I only save lives. You should take care of it yourself. All right, I shall personally give her a lesson to shut her up. It is all up to you. I only ask for complete silence before I start operating on her lungs. I cannot risk killing her in prison due to a distraction. Once she is dead, she will not be able to be punished in the public eye. Don't worry. You can go in and do whatever you please. I will wait outside and be sure that nothing distracts you. Their conversation was carried out secretly through directed audios, so none of his men could hear anything. However, none of their secrets managed to escape Gu Zijia's ears. The Monster King was indeed a bastard. Not only had he plotted against the creator of the universe, but he had also tortured Wu Qianyan and intended to use her body to save his sister's life. Gu Shizhou was glad that she made it into the prison in advance. Otherwise, she might not be able to save Wu Qianyan. She gave a stern look of disapproval to the man in purple. The cold-blooded man who cared only about money was nothing like Di Fui. Perhaps it was only his appearance that reminded her of Di Fui. Gu Shizhou was overwhelmed by a sudden urge to take the mask away so that she could reveal the man's true identity. At that moment, the mysterious man in purple gave her another look with squinted eyes. Gu Shizhou found her heart thumping in anxiety. The man still reminded her of Di Fui. Soon, the group of people stopped by a cell, and the Monster King unlocked the door for everyone to go in. Gu Shizhou finally saw her servant. Wu Qianyan was obviously injured. Her face looked pale and lacking vitality. Bloodstains were all over her body. As soon as she heard the door, she opened her eyes and flew immediately into a rage. What a foolish and self-indulgent ruler. You will never get any information about my master from me. What else do you want to do to me? Just do it. My master will get revenge for me on all of you. The Monster King gave her a wicked smile and said, Don't worry. I am not here to make you say anything. I even have a doctor here to help you with your injuries. You should do as he says and make no trouble. Wu Qianyan stared at him doubtfully and refused to believe anything that he said. Nonetheless, the Monster King was reluctant to say anything more. He turned to the man in purple and said, Mister, I shall hand over everything here to you. He then left swiftly with his men. The prison was sealed again, leaving the man in purple inside with Wu Qianyan and Gu Shizhou, who was still invisible. After the Monster King was gone, the man in purple gave his shoulder a few quick taps, as if sweeping off the dust that the Monster King's hand left behind. Gu Shizhou observed the neatness of his robes and the meticulous details of his appearance. The man in purple and Di Fui looked very much alike, and both seemed to have an obsessive compulsion for hygiene and neatness. Who are you? What do you want from me? Wu Qianyan treated him with defensive hostility. I am here to save your life, the man in purple briefly replied. Wu Qianyan answered in disbelief, How? Suddenly, she thought of Fan Qianshi, and her eyes immediately glistened with hope. Did Qianshi, the young master, send you here? I know he has many friends from across the world. He must have sent you here for me. The man in purple was unimpressed. Sorry to disappoint you. He then put a seal on one of Wu Qianyan's acupuncture points, so she could no longer talk. When all was done, he took a look at Gu Shizhou in the corner. Divine Lord, how long do you plan to stay invisible? Astonished, Wu Qianyan certainly did not expect Gu Zijia's presence in the prison cell. She followed the direction of his eyes and looked at the corner of the prison cell. Perplexed, she could not see Gu Shizhou anywhere. Soon, Gu Shizhou made her entrance. Slowly, her figure came into sight. Gu Shizhou locked her gaze on the man in purple and said, Sponsored content. The man in purple quickly put one finger on his lips and signaled her not to mention his name. Divine Lord, you may take your servant away now. Wu Qianyan reeled forward in shock and disbelief. She kneeled before Gu Shizhou and looked at her tearfully. Soon, she wiped away her tears and continued to touch her forehead on the ground repeatedly to worship Gu Shizhou. Gu Shizhou pulled her up. If I take her away, how are you going to answer to the Monster King? Do you need me to take you along? She asked Di Fui. It would not be a problem at all for her to teleport away with two of them together. Di Fui squinted his eyes at her. I have my own plans. I can take her out even without your help. How? Gu Shizhou was curious about his plans. The prison was heavily guarded, so it would be difficult for him to take a prisoner out when so many people were watching. Also, she did not know anyone else that was equipped with the ability to teleport. Sponsored content. Di Fui did not answer. Instead, he took out his storage bag and uncovered a person from within. The person lay unconsciously on the ground. Gu Shizhou took a closer look and was shocked. This is the monster princess. Di Fui calmly explained, she is the one who should be punished with 1,000 cuts. In an instant, he was already performing a spell on the monster princess to alter her looks. She now shared the same appearance as Wu Qianyan. It was so skillfully imitated that she was indistinguishable from the original, even her injuries looked the same. Gu Shizhou finally had a grasp of his so-called plan. He was substituting one person for another. Sponsored content. She suddenly thought of the bag that Di Fui briefly showed her. It somehow reminded her of something that she once saw in the past. From her memory, she knew that someone had the same bag. However, it had been a long time since she last saw the bag. She had lain dormant for too long to remember things from the past, but she remembered that the bag could only store non-living items. Any living thing would suffocate to death in the bag. May I have a look at your bag? No, Di Fui rejected right away. She had never been rejected in such a direct manner before. Gu Shizhou sighed. Don't worry. I am not trying to get my hands on your precious bag. It somehow reminds me of an old friend's item, so I really just want to have a look. An old friend? Di Fui was intrigued. Which old friend of yours? His eyes looked fiery and a little intimidating. Gu Shizhou shook her head and frankly said, an old friend from a very long time ago. You are too young to know anyone from those times. Let me ask you again. Where did you get the bag? The bag can only carry non-living items, right? Scornfully, Di Fui answered, is this an interrogation? That is not what I meant. I really am just curious, Gu Shizhou replied with a frown. Sponsored content. Sorry, but I am not obliged to answer your curiosity, Di Fui sternly said. A small, narrow-bladed knife then slowly appeared on his palm. He frowned as he took a look at the monster princess. Divine Lord, do you know how to extract one's pulmonary lobe from their lungs? He threw the question at Gu Shizhou. Confidently, Gu Shizhou folded her arms in a display of authority. Of course. As the creator of the universe, she could even make a human being from scratch if she was given enough materials. Extracting one's pulmonary lobe was only a small matter. Di Fui looked relieved. He then passed the knife to Gu Shizhou and said, please operate on her, Divine Lord. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Gu Shizhou refused the invitation. I am not obliged to do that for you. She intended to give Di Fui a taste of his own medicine. Sponsored content. Divine Lord, I am actually here to help you, Di Fui said while looking at her intently. You should finish what you have started then. The monster princess is quite pretty. You should be glad that you have a glimpse of her body, Gu Shizhou teased. She then grasped Wu Qianyan by her wrist and was ready to leave. If I told you the secret of my bag, would you care to stay and help me? Di Fui quickly added. Gu Shijiu stopped abruptly. Tell me first, and then I will decide, she answered without looking back at him. As offered, Di Fui was ready to tell her what she wanted to know. The bag has always been around. I do not remember who it belonged to in the first place. You were right. The bag can only contain non-living items, but there is an exception. Without any breath and consciousness, the being can be contained in the bag for a while. Sponsored content. His explanation was thorough but not entirely convincing. As far as I am concerned, a living thing can still breathe even without consciousness. Gu Shijiu turned around and said to Di Fui. Di Fui revealed a pill to her. With this, one can mimic death for 2 hours. Gu Shijiu finally understood the situation. You said that even without my help, you can still take Qian Yan out of here. Were you going to feed her the pill so that she could mimic death and fit into your bag? She finally made sense of the whole situation now. Divine Lord, you are absolutely right. Please operate on her now. Sponsored content. Gu Shijiu took the knife and played with it around her fingers. I do not need it, she said while flicking the knife away from her hand. She did not even bother to strip off the princess' robes. She laid her hand flat on the prince's chest, and her palm slowly turned invisible as she marked a slash across her skin, thus cutting the prince's chest wide open. Oddly enough, the way she cut the skin open with her bare hand caused no bleeding at all. She then pinched her fingers together inside of the wound and squeezed out a piece of the pulmonary lobe. Swiftly, she put her palms together, and the flesh came together and healed instantly. Keep the scar, Di Fui added. Gu Shijiu gave the wound a few flicks, and soon, the scar remained on the princess' chest. The whole operation was smooth and brief. Everything was done in less than 15 minutes. Clear blown away, Wu Qianyan looked at her in silent wonder. In awe, Di Fui gazed at Gu Shijiu with the same amount of respect and admiration. You truly are the creator of the universe. She flicked her fingers as if trying to clean them. There was not a single drop of blood on her delicate hands. She then pulled Wu Qianyan over and said, You have saved my servant's life this time, so I shall no longer be bothered by the way you previously made me as a tool to your plans. We are even now. She left swiftly with her teleportation ability. Di Fui was speechless. He knew clearly that this would not be the last time they met. Nonetheless, he set the matter aside and fed the monster princess with a pill. Soon, she regained consciousness. She realized that she was still in the prison cell. Panicked, she looked around and saw a manly figure's back. She tried to sit up, but pain swept through her entire body every time she moved. Sponsored content. She took a deep breath and said in anger, Who are you? Why are you standing there like an idiot? How dare you not bow before me? Her voice was unexpectedly weak, for she did not have the strength to express her frustration aloud. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. The man slowly turned around to look at her. He was still wearing a mask, but the mask was not able to conceal his grace and elegance. Sponsored content. The monster princess was stunned momentarily. Her eyes sparkled with light as soon as she saw the man. You should remove the mask so that I can have a better look at your face. If you are good looking enough, I shall forgive you for neglecting the princess' need. You are not qualified for that, the man sternly replied. How dare you? Who do you think you are? How could you talk to me in such a defiant manner? When I get out of here, I will tell my brother everything that you have done so that he can cut you into 1,000 pieces as your punishment. The princess was triggered. How many lives have you taken away using this cruel method? The look in his eyes was intimidating. Sponsored content. Humph. Are you scared? Every act of defiance must be punished with 1,000 cuts. There were too many men who disobeyed me, so all of them ended up the same. How can I remember them all? However, if you behave, I will treat you differently. For over 300 years, you have slashed 481 men to death and murdered 530 women with your venomous python. The man interrupted her with the death toll. The monster princess was shocked. Who are you? How did you find such information? You should only answer yes or no. Sponsored content, yes, but so what? They deserved it. They failed to obey me. I cannot remember exactly how many of them died in my hands, the princess answered arrogantly. She could not care less about the number of deaths, for she was already used to it. She had been taking advantage of her royal status and her brother's special favor for her to the point where she became so arrogant and domineering. Apart from her murderous instinct, she was also very attracted to handsome men. She would take any man that she found gorgeous, and if he refused to stay, she would sentence him to death by dismemberment. Surely, the death sentence would only be carried out in private. She would be there to witness their death. Every time these men died painfully, she found herself to be in euphoria just by hearing them screaming. As for the women who died in the prince's hands, they were mostly passers-by who had their eyes lingering on the handsome men that the princess wanted or women who used to be the men's fiancés or close friends. As long as her men expressed any kind of affection towards other women, the princess would immediately be driven with immense jealousy and do crazy things. So many people had lost their lives in her hands. There was no way she could keep track. The fiery look in Di Fui's eyes slowly faded, but the smile of mockery remained. It is best if you admit it yourself. What is there that I cannot admit? Humph. No matter how many people I kill, my brother will always have my back. I shall never be treated any lesser in his eyes or be punished in any way. Without the creator of the universe, I would not be so badly injured. Humph. When I have fully recovered, I shall kill the creator of the universe and slash the bitch piece by piece. She made a nasty remark that was embellished in gore and violence. Sponsored content finally, she looked around the cell and was perplexed. She asked, why am I here in this hideous place? Didn't my brother arrange a room for me in the Jinxiu Palace? By the way, where is my brother? He told me that a scapegoat is waiting for me. Why am I here, all of a sudden? I am the one who brought you here, Di Fui calmly explained. Don't worry. You will get to see your brother shortly. He pointed at one of her acupuncture points and then muted her speech, right before her brother walked into the cell. Mister, is everything done? Di Fui showed him a small bag that contained the pulmonary lobe. I am glad that I have not disappointed you. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Delighted, the Monster King took the pulmonary lobe over to have a look at it before giving it back to Di Fui. Mister, please proceed to Jinxiu Palace and replace this with my sister's dying lungs. Sponsored content. The monster princess was confused, but could immediately tell that something was not quite right. She continued to make inaudible pulses of crying from the corner. Unfortunately, she could not move or say anything. Di Fui threw her a quick glance and said, Your Majesty, this woman is equipped with some spiritual power. I am afraid that muting her speech will not be enough. What if she breaks free and starts making noise in the streets? That is easy. I shall cut her tongue away. He walked briskly towards the monster princess and secured her chin. The look in her eyes was filled with horror and fright, but that did not stop the Monster King. A sharp knife was then presented in front of her. With a clean cut, blood was spilled all over the place, and her entire tongue was cut away. She trembled in pain as soon as her tongue was cut. Her trembling body clearly showed her fear. She was in so much pain that she almost passed out. The Monster King thought that the bloody scene was filthy, so he let go of the monster princess and watched as she crashed to the ground in agony. Come here. Sponsored content. 2 soldiers approached. Take her to the prisoner's carriage and send her away to the execution ground. The Monster King commanded. Alarmed, the monster princess was confused by her brother's brutality. She disregarded the pain and tried very hard to crawl over to the Monster King's legs, but was given a hard kick before she even made it close. Finally, she lay flat on the ground, with barely any strength to spare. The Monster King refused to look at her any longer and walked right out of the cell along with Di Fui. "Mister, we should do it while it is fresh and warm. Take this pulmonary lobe and save my sister's life." "Will do," Di Fui reassured before walking away. The Monster King quietly watched as Di Fui walked further into the distance. He disapproved of Di Fui's arrogance and unfriendliness but was impressed by his sensibility to tackle different situations. Sponsored content. With the man's help, the Monster King believed that his sister would surely survive. Then, he took a look at the sky and realized that it was almost time to carry out the punishment. He needed to be at the execution ground and personally monitor the entire process as he wanted to know if the creator of the universe would really show up. Arrogantly, he hoped that the weakened creator would show up so that he could teach her a lesson. He talked with his sister to know more about the details of their earlier encounter. He needed to know about Gu Zijia's every move and every spell while fighting the venomous python. From what he observed, the god of creation must have lost a huge part of her spiritual power. Perhaps, she could not even defeat him in her current condition. The creator of the universe had a spiritual body, so he needed to use the double physical and spiritual cultivation to increase his power tremendously. After the cultivation, he could then kill her and consume her body and soul as a whole. Her body would be a better supplement than any of the existing pills around. It would surely improve his physical strength and spiritual power. This was a golden opportunity that he could not afford to miss. He really hoped that the creator would show up. Everything on the execution ground was set up prior to her arrival, so it would be a waste of his meticulous plan if she did not show up. She should be here, he thought. Wu Qianyan was Gu Zijia's one and only servant. Although she was not officially a disciple, he reckoned that Gu Shizhou would still come for her. He then licked his lips in a display of confidence. The reality was considerably different from the Monster King's sweet expectation. Wu Qianyan was tied to the pillar, and the executioner had been slashing her dozens of times so far, yet, the creator of the universe still had not shown up. The Monster King began to get worried. Had anything happened to her? There was no reason why she would not show up today. Had the Emperor Immortal taken her away? The Emperor Immortal was aware of the Monster Kingdom's current situation so that he might have secretly involved himself in the feud. Sponsored content disguised, Gu Shizhou found herself standing among the onlookers. She was delighted to see the monster princess being punished. The violent princess had dismembered many innocent people. Today, she finally got a taste of her own medicine. A sudden voice came interrupting, "Bastard, let go of Qianyan." A young man could be seen approaching the scaffold. Gu Shizhou stood upright. Things were not looking good for her now. The young man was Fan Qianshi, her only disciple that she very much cherished. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. When Gu Shizhou finally took Wu Qianyan out of the prison in the Monster Kingdom, she quickly settled her down in a guest inn where she could rest. Gu Shizhou tried to contact Fan Qianshi using her sensing ability to get him to stay with Wu Qianyan and be her caretaker. Still, the boy never answered or returned her call. Sponsored content. Her sensing ability was supposed to be a form of telepathic communication. Only her disciple and her servant were equipped with the ability to receive her call. She could easily reach out to them as long as they stayed within a radius of a few hundred miles. Therefore, Gu Zijia's failure to communicate with Fan Qianshi could only mean two things: he was either hundreds of miles away or was trapped in some sort of forbidden land. Although Wu Qianyan had suffered severe injuries, these wounds could be easily taken care of by Gu Shizhou. Very quickly, she wrapped up Wu Qianyan's open wounds with dressings to help her heal better. Some pills were also administered to help with her internal injuries. In merely an hour, Wu Qianyan was already halfway through her recovery. She could already leave the bed and take care of herself. Relieved, Gu Shizhou put a wizardry barrier at the door before leaving Wu Qianyan alone in the room. When everything was done and secured, she left. Sponsored content. Her original plan was to wait for the dismemberment to come to an end before revealing the truth before the Monster King's eyes. She wanted to humiliate him publicly, but plans changed when Fan Qianxue showed up so suddenly in an unplanned rush. He did not even have the strength to protect himself against the Monster King's 8 best soldiers in his current state. Hence, the way he emerged onto the scaffold was an act of digging his own grave. What a little rebel, Gu Shizhou thought. Gu Shizhou clenched her fists and looked at Fan Qianxue in frustration. He was ruining her plan. The boy went straight for the pillar and shouted, "Hey, bastard! Let go of Qian Yan." Sponsored content. The Monster King was delighted to see him. With the disciples' presence, he now had more reasons to force the creator of the universe to show up. But first, he needed to put on a show. "Fan Qianxue, I have been looking for you. Your time is up. Where is your master? Were you the one responsible for her death? Soldiers! Take him down!" The Monster King exclaimed in a fury. All his soldiers rushed ahead and were ready to fight. In an instant, the scaffold became a war zone. The executioner was not sure if he should continue his work, so he looked at the Monster King for confirmation. The Monster King gestured to his man and firmly said, "Don't stop. Keep going." Therefore, the executioner continued to slice Wu Qianyan into thin pieces of meat. The Monster Prince's speech was no longer muted, but without her tongue, she could only screech in agony, emitting wails like a lost soul. Her voice was piercing, loud enough to make everyone's flesh creep. She screamed on, as her body trembled with each slice. The misery was surely worse than death. Alas, she finally realized how painful it actually was to be dismembered. On the other hand, Gu Shizhou was still watching the fight. She had her spells ready underneath her sleeves, so if anything went wrong, she could assist Fan Qianxue as soon as possible. After a while, she found herself astonished by his adequacy. Fan Qianxi's kung fu had increased by twofold. He was able to move unhindered among the armed men. Also, he had never once put himself in an inferior position. The moves that he was using were taught to him by Gu Shizhou, but the source of spiritual power that he was channeling was obtained from something else. She could obviously sense a hint of violence and rage within him. Sponsored content. As soon as he emerged on the scaffold, 2 soldiers were already injured. She wanted to communicate with him via her sensing ability and tell her that the girl on the pillar was an imposter, so there was no point for him to fight anymore. However, seeing his ability made her change her mind. Fan Qianxi's attacks were a little odd. Since he was doing great on his own, she decided not to interrupt. With a swift leap, Fan Qianxue sent the guard across the air. After a few twists and turns, he found his way up to the pillar and launched a stinging attack at the executioner. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. The executioner spat out a mouthful of blood and was severely beaten. Hence, the punishment was halted. Sponsored content. The Monster King saw the whole scene unfold and decided that it was time for him to interrupt. His spiritual power was already at the level of a great deity, so every move of his was equipped with an enormous force. He launched his first strike at Fan Qianxue, which was a powerful attack. However, Fan Qianxue could easily take a step back to avoid getting hit. Gu Shizhou observed his moves and could already make a few predictions. She could see that the Monster King would not hit Fan Qianxue since one tiny step was enough to avoid his first attack. But to her utter surprise, Fan Qianxue did not move at all. He disregarded the swift and fierce attack that was clearly aimed at him. Instead, he went straight to the pillar and cut away the chains that were holding Wu Qianyan in place. As a result, Fan Qianxue had to suffer a blow to his back in return for breaking one of the chains. After a loud snap, Fan Qianxue was hit and sent flying across the square. Being severely injured, he spat out a mouthful of blood while hanging on helplessly in the air. The plot twist was alarming for Gu Shizhou. She could no longer stay still. With a swift leap, she teleported right in the air and held Fan Qianxue in place. Fan Qianxue had suffered a powerful blow, so as soon as Gu Shizhou grabbed him in her hands, she had to take a swift turn and help him find his footing. Gracefully, they both landed on the scaffold. Sponsored content, Master. Fan Qianxue was happy to see her. Unfortunately, he spat out another mouthful of blood. She could easily tell how badly he was hit. His complexion was pale and drawn, but fortunately, he remained conscious. Master, I thought you did not want me anymore. What an idiot. Gu Shizhou steadied him on the platform before putting a pill right into his mouth. I never asked you to leave. What makes you think that I gave up on you? Without any hesitation, Fan Qianxue swallowed the pill. Soon enough, he was no longer spitting out blood. His complexion, however, was still ghastly pale. Master, I have done my best, but I still could not get Qianyan free. Gu Shizhou frowned at him. She knew immediately that her words had prompted him to risk his life in this rescue mission. All she wanted to see was his attitude and kindness towards a friend. She never wanted him to rush into a crude and impetuous decision that did more harm to him than good. As opposed to her expectation, she thought that he was smart enough to analyze the situation first before making any reckless moves. Sponsored content. Initially, Gu Shizhou had her identity disguised while moving among the crowd. However, as soon as she emerged in the air, she finally revealed her true self. Fortunately, her face was still concealed under a mask, so her ethereal beauty had yet to be uncovered. She stood high up on the scaffold in her emerald dress, overlooking the crowd with an overwhelming sense of authority. Who are you? The Monster King called out loud. He was still standing next to the pillar. Gu Shizhou finally expressed her contempt. You have pushed my disciple to the edge only to see me here today. Now that I am already here, why do you have to play dumb? Then you must be the creator of the universe. Just as you can see, I am. The crowd gasped in disbelief as soon as they heard the brief exchange. They had never seen the creator of the universe before, nor had they felt her strong presence. Her aura was so intimidating that one could hardly stand straight when she was present. Some of them quickly fell to their knees to worship her. Soon enough, the rest followed. Most of the people in the square were already kneeling and touching their heads on the ground as an act of respect. Meanwhile, the Monster King kept his composure. So you claim to be the creator of the universe, but do you have any proof? He asked scornfully. Gu Shizhou raised her eyebrow at him. Before she could say anything, Fan Qianxue was already defending her. I can prove very well that she is my master. Sponsored content. The Monster King had it all planned out. You? I can assume that this is all but a trick, made up by you and Wu Qianyan to cover up the fact that you have killed the creator of the universe. He then gazed at Gu Shizhou intently. It is easy to prove that you are the creator of the universe. You just need to defeat me in a battle. Otherwise, I will sentence you to death for impersonating the Divine Lord. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. It was his final act in his orchestrated master plan. Sponsored content. Gu Shizhou teased him, seems like you need a lesson. Humph. How can an impostor be powerful enough to teach me a lesson? The Monster King bitterly dismissed her words. He took a look at Wu Qianyan, who was still tied to the pillar. Apparently, losing a chain did not bring her freedom. She was still very securely positioned on the scaffold. At this point, she was so awfully sliced that she was basically unrecognizable. Meanwhile, her body still twitched and trembled in agony. She kept making inaudible utterances as if moaning for help. Fortunately for her, the executioner was injured on the platform and could not get himself up. Get me another executioner and keep the punishment going. The Monster King had a smug face. I am already here. Do you really need to continue torturing her? Gu Shizhou asked. Sponsored content. Certainly. The Monster King then wickedly said, "You have not been able to prove your identity yet, so her punishment should not be mitigated. So, you will only let her go when I defeat you, right?" "Absolutely." "Very well, then." Gu Shijiu gave her sleeves a flick and said confidently, "Let us begin." As soon as she made the announcement, she went straight for the Monster King without wasting any time. She was already launching her first strike. Sponsored content. The Monster King was slightly taken by surprise. He thought that he would be able to trigger Gu Shijiu into a mad fury. Never had he thought that she would handle his sarcasm so calmly. Perhaps, the creator of the universe knew how to keep calm at all times, he thought. She must have been through enough to keep her composure under all circumstances. He assumed that she must have been acting like she did not care about her servant, so there was no point for him to punish her any longer. Therefore, he decided to go against her will and kept the punishment going. He needed to make sure that Wu Qianyan distracted her so that she would be defeated more easily. With that in mind, he made a command to his men to execute the punishment in a more tortuous manner while he was still battling with Gu Shijiu. The executioners were briefed beforehand, so as soon as the Monster King commanded, they would slash the body parts where Wu Qianyan was the most sensitive. Their knives were all cleansed with salt water before cutting through her flesh. The amount of pain that the monster princess had to suffer was of an inhuman scale. She could not handle the torment and passed out right away. Unfortunately, it did not take long before the executioners splashed her with a bucket of salt water to keep her awake. She could not help but scream in agony with heart-wrenching cries. The Monster King only regarded her cries as sweet melodies to his ears. To his surprise, Gu Shijiu seemed completely unaffected. Her moves were all graceful and smooth without the slightest hesitation. Her martial arts were original and authentically hers, so the Monster King had no idea how to brand her style of fighting. After a dozen rounds, the Monster King started to regret his decision. Gu Zijia's spiritual power was unexpectedly higher than he expected. Every move of hers was charged with immense power. In addition to that, she also kept dazzling her opponent with many different tactics. At first, she started attacking him with a long whip. But all of a sudden, she introduced her sword into the fight. Occasionally, she would use a spell and turn the ground into a desert filled with sand to trap the Monster King. Usually, practitioners would only choose one element to practice their kung fu. For example, it would either be gold or fire. Very few people could master the spiritual power of two different elements. Gu Shijiu was surely an exception. Her moves were very complex, formed by all 5 elements: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Therefore, it was difficult to catch up with the unpredictability of her kung fu. The Monster King kept backing up, almost to the edge of the platform. Sponsored content. While fighting, the Monster King could not help but curse at his sister. The creator of the universe was much stronger than what he was told. Based on the way things were going, he would most probably be defeated at the end. He intended to win the battle, but the truth was the very opposite of what he had hoped for. As expected, he was slowly losing. A vine suddenly emerged from the ground and entangled his feet. While he was busy freeing himself, he did not see a shining bat that was coming his way. With a swift swing, he was hit right on his waist and suffered in agonizing pain. Pale and defeated, he quickly shifted backward and surrounded himself and his troops. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. He called out icily, "I have underestimated what this imposter can do. However, that does not change the fact that you are merely impersonating the Divine Lord. Take her down. I have so many questions for her." Sponsored content. He waved his hand as a signal to summon the troops that were assigned to ambush her. He was worried that he might get hurt in the sea of arrows, so he immediately set up a wizardry barrier for his own protection. To his utter surprise, not one single arrow was launched. The dramatic wave of flying arrows that he had planned did not happen at all. There was nothing but dead silence in the square. Gu Shijiu quickly found her way to Fan Qianshi. Although he was secured in a protective barrier, she could not be sure that the barrier would not be breached. If Fan Qianzhi were caught, she would really be in a bad position. Puzzled, Gu Shizhou did not quite understand the silence that fell on the square. She knew that the Monster King was trying to summon his men. Indeed, she managed to intimidate quite an amount of troops, but she did not manage to feed them all with intimidation. Surely, there would still be some remaining soldiers who were loyal to the Monster King and would carry out their missions, regardless. They should have at least launched some arrows. There should be at least 1,000 arrows or 100 of men coming her way. To her astonishment, there was none. Had something happened to the troops? Sponsored content at this moment, she could only think of Di Fui. She wondered if he had secretly defeated all of the soldiers. Nonetheless, his kung fu had a limit, too. He couldn't defeat so many people in such a short time. The Monster King was equally baffled. The silence was followed by his cries of anger, "Move!" Only his closest guards answered, but the secret troops that he had in place remained unresponsive. The Monster King knew that something was not quite right. Just when he was about to send someone to check it out, the executioner's sudden exclaim distracted him. "What are you shouting for?" The Monster King was irritated. Sponsored content, he turned around and was dumbstruck by what he saw on the pillar. There was a flood dragon on the pillar with hardly any flesh left on its body. Only its bones remained. A striking red crown sat on the dragon's head. The Monster King could easily recognize the crown. The flood dragon was Yaotingting. The crown had very well proven that the body was his sister's. The Monster King and his family were descendants of the flood dragon line. As soon as they obtained their human forms, they would not easily reveal their original appearance. Only under two conditions would they be revealed: either they were willing to show themselves, or they were dead. The Monster King was so shocked that he was unable to speak. "Ting-ting," he called out blankly. Need to say, his desperate calls were unanswered. The monster princess was already dead. Panicked, the executioner fell to the ground and begged for forgiveness. "Your Majesty, this is not of my doing. I did not know that she was our princess." "Bloody bastard." The Monster King stared at the executioner with his bloodshot eyes before giving him a deadly strike. Flames started emerging from his palm as he aimed a fiery strike at the group of executioners in the crowd and immediately turned them into balls of fire. These people had become victims of the Monster King's fury. Who did this? Who did this? The Monster King snarled a threat. The entire stage was shaking as a result of his thunderous voice. He gave the flood dragon's body a quick examination and found a seal. It acted as an inhibitor to prevent Yaotingting from revealing her original self even when she was critically injured. If Yaotingting had been able to show her original self earlier, the Monster King would not have committed such terrible blunders. Hence, the person behind these plots had every outcome planned out. Sponsored content. The Monster King was finally reminded of the culprit. "Go to Jinxiu Palace and get me the man," he sternly said. "That is unnecessary." A man could be heard chuckling. His voice was loud and clear enough for everyone in the square to hear him. Baffled, the crowd turned to the voice. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us.